Most people believe the Bible is true.
Has science proven the Bible wrong?
Is creation and evolution a side issue?
Our ancestors understood origins by extrapolating from their own experience. How else could they have done it? Then science came along and taught us that we are not the measure of all
The
things.
simplest explanation is, there is no God. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate.
You and I are the product of billions
We share a
of
common
years,
ancestor
billions of years.
with chimpanzees.
This animal eventually became human.
I'm sorry, but if you don't understand that humans and monkeys came from a common ancestor...
Single out evolution and act as if there's some kind of major scientific dispute, and in fact...
Evolution is a fact, not a theory.
Evolution is a fact. I mean, that's right. There's no question.
Evolution isn't an opinion, it's fact.
Evolution is scientific fact.
I'm sorry, I believe in evolution.
Lived in the ocean 200 million years ago.
8 million years ago,
We emerged from microbes and muck.
Welcome to the Engage Truth Show. I'm your host, Caleb Harrelson, today, and I'm so excited, guys, about this episode. And it's really, we're calling this kind of like an afternoon conference here on October 17th, 2020. And I'm real excited about the guest that I have joining me today, my good friend and Charlie Wolcott, and he's coming in and joining us today from Worldview Warriors. And Charlie, we're so excited to have you join us today. So welcome to the show. Charlie, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Awesome. Now, Charlie has been doing for a little while, been doing some research on radiometric dating, and he's been kind of just digging into this more, and I'm really excited about what he's going to present to us today. And he's actually, we're gonna have at least 2 commercial breaks. We're gonna feature Worldview Warriors and about our ministry, Engage Apologetics, and some other great creation ministries as well. And I'm just super excited about what we have for the schedule this afternoon. And Charlie, maybe you can tell our listeners and viewers a little more about yourself and your ministry as well.
Okay, so yeah. So again, it's great to have you on board here. And so I am a physics teacher here in El Paso, Texas. I've been doing this. I've been teaching for about 2 years now, doing it at the regular level and at the AP level. And AP Physics has been a really good a course for me to teach because of how well it forces me to think about all the different things together, the different pieces of physics together. That's one thing that a lot of science courses and presentations that we hear, they really don't do that. They only know they're one little piece, but they don't really see how things all work together. And God's given me a really great mind to be able to see all these different pieces and how they interact. Right? In 2014, 2015, I did a creation biblical studies seminar called the Cadre with the Creation Truth Foundation. It was an accredited certificate program. And what that did is that it equipped me to be able to defend Scripture primarily from the angle of Genesis, and to teach people how to look at everything from a biblical perspective. Okay, so that's my background. I've been with Worldview Warriors since 2014 as well. Just happened to start those two at the same time. That's just how God led things to be. I've been a writer, blogger, and speaker for the Worldview Warrior Ministries since 2014. And the goal of our ministry is to teach and equip this next generation, primarily from primarily from the 14 to 24 age student range, but also to equip parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles on how to equip their own kids themselves. And so and we have a variety of different means of doing that. We kind of discovered blogging and online radio and online stuff before it became popular. And so that's kind of some of our history. We've got online blogs that we have different writers do things every day. Mine are on Fridays every week. We also have a radio show called Do Not Keep Silence. The rest of the group is actually having another conference in Ohio right now, and we tried to get me to go speak with them, but it just didn't work out. But that opened the door for this to happen.
Yeah, well, praise God. We're so excited to have you join us today. And so today's topic, a lot of people are like, Radiometric, what is this? Now, those who have been studying this field would be like, yeah, this is really important, and we understand why. And let me bring up to speed those who are just tuning in today and why we should even care about this topic. And then we'll jump right into it here with Charlie's presentation he's worked so hard on. And now this issue, it really matters, particularly ultimately is the question that in the creation apologetics realm is that when did death enter the world is one of the key issues when it comes to the timeline and why we should even care. Because if we're going to argue that there was millions of years of death before Adam and Eve, and thus if you were a Christian approaching the text and reinterpreting it and saying that there were millions of years of death and the days didn't really mean days, and then we get to Adam and Eve, then we're saying God is calling death good and death came before the fall in Genesis 3. Well, that undermines the foundation of the gospel. Now, can you deny the timeline is laid out in the genealogy to be a believer? Certainly, but you're undermining the foundation of Scripture itself. And really, here's a big thing is that I was watching a tour yesterday of the Smithsonian. One of my friends, he works in a great ministry giving tours, biblical tours, creation tours through secular museums. Stephen Policastro did a great job. And one of the things I saw in the dinosaur section at the Smithsonian in D.C., I was watching an online version of it, is it said deep time, a journey through deep time. And that immediately stood out to me. And why does time matter so much? And Charlie, I know you will expand on it so much as well. Is deep time is the answer to every problem, allegedly. They can wipe away any issue of objections as far as evolution. But if you take away the deep time, then there's a lot of problems for evolution, and then you see it fitting in with the biblical timeline a lot better. So, Charlie, I'll hand it over to you now.
Yeah, so a lot of what you mentioned in your intro is it's pretty much spot on. I'll just add a couple of points there. If death preceded the sin of Adam and Eve, then what that means is that sin cannot be the penalty for sin, and that means the death of Jesus Christ did not actually account for sin. Okay, so whenever we talk about Jesus dying for our sins, that means Jesus only died for what sin did. And if sin and decay and death was all part of the world prior to sin, then Jesus' death doesn't redeem that. And then so our the world we have to look forward to is not a good and perfect world. And so a lot of it just doesn't make sense.
Oh, and you bring up such a great point that if we're saying he's restoring things to before the fall, but before the fall there was death and suffering, then you have you have a lot of problems. Exactly. So yeah, great point. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and then the whole thing about time. Time is the battleground for how the battle for is the Bible true. That's where the primary front of this war between biblical authority is being fought for the last almost 200 years. And there are a lot of people that think it's just a secondary issue, a side issue. It doesn't matter as long as we believe in Jesus. That's all we have to care about. But this is where the front is. The front of the spiritual warfare is being fought in this area, and we can't take that lightly. Okay, so radiometric dating methods is I would describe it as like the golden goose. I'm not sure that's not quite the right term I'm looking for, but it's one of the absolute central factors that has to be addressed when we're dealing with origins. Okay, so I've been again my background. I've studied physics. I teach physics for a living, and so I'm not a stranger to the science. But I've also been studying radiometric dating methods as a personal research project for the last 7 years, pretty much in a way, kind of on and off, just because of my schedule, my teaching schedule. However, what I've been uncovering is it has simply just blown my mind at how bad it really is, and so that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. Okay. Are these scientific are these methods, are they scientific, are they fact, or are they fiction? Okay, and so this is a very technical topic. Okay, and for those of you that are not scientifically minded, don't worry. What I tend to do is I tend to take that and show kind of the big picture, what it's going to look and what's really happening behind the scenes. So here's kind of what I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to take a brief look at what these methods are. Again, this is a very technical topic. I'm just going to give you the big picture here. Then I'm going to be talking about what we call what I would describe as a test case. Okay, we want to make sure these methods are robust and that they can withstand data that or input that's not meant to be what they're accounted for. We're going to be looking at tactics used to defend these methods, and then I'm going to share some of the personal research that I've been doing that is unique. Okay, and when I say this, I've talked with creation organizations about what I've been looking into, and they've never heard someone taking the angle that I'm taking from. So I'm going to give you a little exposure to that, and then we'll conclude, hopefully within 2 hours. Okay, but bear with me. This is going to be an information dump, so I would recommend that you save this video and watch it a few times, just because there's going to be a lot of good information here. Okay, so introduction. Okay, so what are these methods and how do they work? Okay, what are radiometric dating methods and why do I need to know about them? What are they supposed to do? Okay, so just a real brief history. In the early 1800s, early 1900s, scientists, including Madame Curie, discovered that certain elements and isotopes were unstable and they gave off radiation. Okay, and that's what led to this discovery of radioactive decay. Little sidetrack here. When skeptics tend to argue that we deny radiometric dating methods, they tend to say that we deny all the science related to that. And the answer is no, we don't. We're just objecting to their particular application. Okay, radioactive decay is absolutely a fact. Okay, so if we remember our basic chemistry, in the atomic nucleus there are protons and neutrons, and the number of protons determine the atomic number and the element, and the neutrons determines the particular isotope, a variation of that element, and they also help give balance to the nucleus. But there are certain isotopes that are unstable, and they're going to decay or break down. Okay. We call the unstable isotope apparent, and the result is, and what it results into is what we call the daughter isotope. Okay, and how it does this, there are 3 different types of radioactive decay: alpha, beta, and gamma. But the exact details of that are unimportant for what we're going to be covering today. Okay, for those that want to go into the technical side of things, that is important because that determines how the breakdown is going to take place. Okay. And so once they learned that these things decay, they were like, well, let's measure how fast does it decay. Okay, and then from there, once they figured out the rate at which things decay, they're like, well, we can determine ages of things. Okay, so as research was done, what they seemed to indicate was that these isotopes would decay at a consistent pattern. Okay, and then and after doing mathematical transformations and dimensional analysis, They started applying the concept of the half-life. Okay, and a half-life by definition is the substance, or the half-life of a substance is the amount of time it takes for half of a substance to decay. Okay, so to kind of help give you a visual of that, this slide will kind of illustrate that. So one of the isotopes that breaks down is carbon-14. Okay, so if you ever hear about carbon dating or radiocarbon isotope dating, this is one of those models. So at whatever starting point you have a pure sample of carbon-14. Okay, its half-life is measured at 5,730 years, and so theoretically, after one half-life, after 5,730 years, half of that carbon-14 is going to decay into nitrogen-14. Okay, and then after another 5,730 years, or two half-life cycles, one half of that carbon-14 is going to decay as well. That leaves us with 3/4, 1/4 of carbon-14, 3/4 of the daughter, nitrogen. And for this particular method, they usually say about 10 to 12 half-lives is the maximum limits of the methods, and so they say their range is about 60,000 years. Okay, and that varies a little bit from resource to resource. Okay, any questions so far, Caleb? Is this making sense?
Oh yeah, you're doing great, man. This is awesome.
All right. Yeah. So yeah. Anytime you want me to clarify anything, feel free to interrupt me, and then we'll just keep going. All righty. So the exponential decay function. Okay. This is again, this is going to be probably the most technical part of what I'm going to be talking about, because there's going to be a little bit of math, but I'm not going to go into great details about the math. Okay. So the formula is N equals NO times e to the negative KT. And for those that are not math people and do not understand exponential decay functions, that just goes over people's heads. Don't worry about that. For today's purposes, don't worry about it. So N is the number of the parent isotopes that's currently remaining. Okay. Now I want to make something very clear here. This is the only thing that is actually directly measured. Okay. When using this formula and all the other formulas that they use in order to utilize this is capital N here is the only thing that we can directly measure, because that is what we are measuring right now today. Okay, the NO is the number of original parent isotopes when the clock, as they can call it, was set. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about very small amounts here. Okay. Carbon-14, potassium 40, just for a couple examples, they are very rarely occurring. Okay, and we're talking about like decimal points of a % of a typical sample. Okay, now there's a lot more details to this than what I'm going to explain here, but in order to really determine the original amount, you need the number of daughter isotopes to determine this, because you have to assume that the original amount that okay, I'm going to use potassium argon for example. Potassium decays into argon, and so we got to use the amount of argon to know how much potassium was originally there. Okay, uranium, lead. The scientists have to make the assumption that all the lead that is there is a direct result of radioactive decay. So in order to do this, you got to know how many daughter isotopes you have in order to get this number. And there are other methods like the isochron method, which it gets very mathematical, very technical. Again, I'm not going to cover that today. K is the decay constant, and that's determined by the half-life measurements. Okay, and they just apply the natural log and apply to the natural logarithm, and then do mathematical transformations to get the decay equation. And that's where that constant comes from. But it's primarily determined by the half-life measurement. And then T is basically the age of the sample, which is what everyone is looking for. Okay, and then this information you can find at pretty much any website that talks about exponential decay or radioactive decay functions. Okay, and so this is just one of the ones I found. Okay, so I'm not going to make again. What I'm trying to do here is just trying to explain how the process is supposed to work in big general terms, okay? Now, in using this decay equation, I've already talked about this a little bit. There are four major assumptions, okay, that have to be accounted for. You need to know the initial amount of parent isotope, okay? In any kind of algebra class that we've taken, you can determine the slope of a graph with at least 2 data points. But the problem that we have is that we only have one that we actually can directly measure. So we have to figure out how much where we're starting on that graph. Otherwise, we could be coming up with just about anything. Okay, we would have no way of knowing an age if we don't know the original amount of parent isotope. We also need to know the initial amount of daughter isotope in order to be able to figure that out. Okay, so again, I've already mentioned that.
You'd say like if there was daughter in there before we're measuring it now, is that what you mean?
Okay, so we need to know for the daughter isotope, we need to know how much of that that we're measuring right now is from radioactive decay, and how much of that was not from radioactive decay.
Okay, right, that makes sense.
Right. We have to assume that there's a constant decay rate. So in other words, nothing can alter the rate of decay. And then another biggie is it's got to be a closed system. So you can't have isotopes that are leaching in and out of the system, because if the daughter or parents were to leak in and out, then that's going to greatly skew your data. Okay, now each of these assumptions are very well documented and addressed in the YEC literature. I am not going to go into detail about this one in this presentation, but these are things that you need to know in order to understand what I will be talking about. Okay. So for practical, I mentioned this a moment ago, but for practical purposes, we really can only use up to 10 half-lives of measurements until there's at that point there's too little of the sample to measure, and 10 half-lives is 1,024th of the original amount. Okay, and again, we're usually talking about very small numbers. So that's kind of yeah.
Would you say? This image kind of helped me that it's kind of like an hourglass like we have on the thumbnail on the video, that you have to make assumptions that there wasn't anything added, the rate of which the sand is falling down. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, the hourglass analogy, the lit candle analogy are frequently used analogies to kind of help showcase what's happening. So you can measure the rates of decay. You can measure how fast the candle is melting, but unless you have some concrete evidence to show otherwise, you really don't have any way of knowing like how long it's been going. Okay, because with the hourglass, it may not have started at exactly 1 hour. You may have flipped it before all the sand got switched from one side to another. You just don't know that unless you have some kind of documentation that shows when it was set.
Right. Yeah. You have to realize that there are assumptions, and I think if people ignore that there are any assumptions, well, then that could be a little naive in the whole process.
Would be a good way to put that. Okay, so in my personal studies, I focus on 4 major radioactive decay methods, and there are numerous others. So you got uranium-238 breaks down into lead-206. Okay, it's got half-life of 4.5 or 4,500 million years, or 4.5 billion, and the date range is 10 to 4,600 million years. You got potassium going to argon. Okay, 1.3 billion year half-life, 50 million to actually that's 50,000 years to 4,600 million years, according to this data table from a university in Waikato in New Zealand. And most university websites with this data tables, they're mostly the same. Okay, there's some variations in the ranges, but not by much. And then rubidium-87 to strontium-87 has got a half-life of 47,000 million years, and also it's usable for ranges from 10 to 4,600 million years. Okay, now Caleb, something stood out when I was doing my research. Something stood out about these dating ranges. Okay, does anything stand out to you? On the last column on the dating ranges.
Okay. Yeah, the half-life and dating range, there's something interesting going on.
Yeah, and you're probably not thinking of what it is, right?
No, tell me.
That's perfect. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. Okay. So we have 3 different half-lives of a wide ranges. Okay. Potassium argon is roughly a third of the range of uranium, and and rubidium is 10 times the half-life of uranium. Yet they all end at the same. Their usability ends at the same point. 4,600 million years. Any idea of what that 4,600 million years or 4.6 billion years is talking about? What do you think?
So that maximum age is... Hold on, let me fix that. So that maximum age, isn't that the assumed age of the Earth, the 4.6 million?
So right there, we have a subtle assumption that not many people pay attention to. These methods are only usable based on the evolutionary story of the age of the Earth. Okay. Yeah. So So
that's like the anchor point for it then.
Yeah, that's the anchor point. And their reasoning is, well, you can't really have substances that are older than the Earth because then it wouldn't be on the Earth. And while that logic is valid, usually your methods can go beyond the age of the Earth. Okay, does that make sense?
What do you mean? Can you unpack that more?
Okay, so if you're going to say rubidium strontium, okay, the secular scientists say that the universe is 13.7, 13.8 billion years. Wouldn't a rubidium strontium method be able to date something that's older than the Earth itself? If that's the case.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how uranium lead, the half-life happens to be exactly the age of the Earth. So I'm like, huh. Okay. Wow. Now that could be coincidental, but that's one of the things I want to point out to you is because as I was doing a mathematical analysis on the half-life to the dating range, I saw this discrepancy, and I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course carbon-14 is the most probably the most famous of all the dating methods. And this particular website says it's good for 100 years to 70,000 years. Okay. And so, it depends on who you talk to. So some are saying that it could be usable for up to 100,000 years now because we're getting better technology. Yeah, but these are the main methods that I've been researching. But I bring this out because I want to point out that the methods are determined by the story, not the story by the methods.
That's an excellent point. Especially because everyone's assuming you're like, no, we're purely objective, but you have to realize that there's a philosophical assumption and starting point that's driving the story, as you said.
Yeah, and I'm watching the YouTube comments right now. We got a guy that's gave me great feedback too.
Yeah.
So, okay, so again, I want us to zoom out and look at the big picture here. What's really happening? Okay, so these dating methods are basically the darling of evolution. And Russ Miller, and I remember you had him for one of your first Engage Truth talks. He describes it as one of the 5 pillars of the naturalistic faith. I'm not sure if that was an intentional a jab at Islam, but it does make sense.
Yeah, it is a pillar. Like we said at the beginning, it's deep time is one of their pillars. Yeah.
And so these methods give them the actual figures that they need in order to be able to reject the Bible's account of creation and origins. Before the radiometric dating methods, they just kind of had guesses. They still did the circular reasoning of dating the rocks with the fossils with the rocks and stuff, but they really didn't have concrete figures to say that with, other than it's way older than what the Bible records. Okay, and so without these methods, the whole system falls apart because they don't have anything else. Right? So these dates provided by these methods, they are considered rock solid, quote unquote, and to the point where don't you dare question them. If you've engaged with anyone on these topics with secularists, that's the attitude you're going to get. It's like, how dare you question these? Okay, and then they'll say like, well, they easily and often agree with each other and with other methods, but are they as sound as they say? So what I'm going to do in this presentation here, okay, so this is just the introduction. What I'm going to do in this presentation is that I'm going to pull the Wizard of Oz. I'm going to look behind the curtain, and I'm going to show you what's happening, and it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and so we're going to see that today. Okay, so in order to make sure that a system works, you've got to use a test case. You got to use test cases. Okay, we're going to test the robustness of a system by trying to break it. Okay, if these methods are truly reliable, that means they've got to be able to take input that they're not meant to be able to handle and handle it correctly. Okay, so my formal degree is in computer science, but God called me into teaching. Okay, so I know what's going on behind the scenes with our computers here and our streaming services and our Facebooks and our YouTubes and all that kind of stuff. I know what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, and in order to make this all work, we have to perform a myriad of test cases. I mean, we were battling some audio issues just as we're trying to get started today, and we had to try out a lot of different things to figure out where the audio problem was coming from. Okay. And so what a test case is, it gives the program a set of data with the intention of trying to break the system, trying to make it crash. Okay, and the goal is to try to figure out where the weaknesses are. Okay, what would cause the system to crash? What would the responses be in certain cases? Okay, I'll rabbit trail here just for a second, but one of my cousins has worked for IT for a variety of companies, and what he does is that he goes out to different companies and his job is to figure out where the weaknesses in the thing is. So one company tried to had him come in to do an analysis on their system to kind of figure out where they're broken, and he started to mingle in with the lunch crowd. Came in, got all the way through into the actual server part of the room with virtually no problems, and so after he did his stuff, he called the manager and the manager was like, "Can you set up a date where you can come?" And the manager and my cousin was like, "Well, I was already there." And the manager was like, "What? How do you know that?" And my cousin said, like, "Did you see the surprise I left in the server room?"
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. So and he said, like, we got lots of problems. Okay, and that was his job. His job was to try to figure out where is the system weak, and what needs to be done to fix it. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's kind of hilarious. I almost think sarcastically, like, there's the guy who's negative. He finally found a job to point out what's wrong with things.
Okay, so again, the goal is to produce a robust system that can handle all sorts of bad input, handle it correctly before it goes out to public. I'm making that. I made that bold on purpose. It's got to be before it goes out in public. Otherwise, we got lots of problems. Okay, I do play video games, and I was immediately turned off by the Xbox systems because every time a new Xbox system would come out, there were all kinds of bugs and it would crash. So I'm like, forget this. Yeah, and so I stuck with Nintendo because Nintendo's has always been reliable. But again, yeah, and I'm faithful to what I grew up with. But again, they didn't do enough testing before the system went out to public because they had deadlines, they had funding, they had all kinds of issues. But they didn't do enough testing, and then when the product went out to the public, it wasn't producing as it should have. Okay, we can do the same thing with these radiometric dating methods. Okay, they have certain ranges that in which they're supposed to be usable for. But if they are robust, they will correctly label samples that are outside of that range as being either too young or too old to date. Okay, does that make sense what we're supposed to be doing here?
Right.
All right. So one group that did that specifically went out to try to figure this out is the RATE team. Okay, so the RATE group is it stands for radioisotope and the age of the Earth. There are 10 PhDs and 1 master's, all in physics and nuclear physics, geology, and all that kind of stuff, and what one that did a study on Hebrew, and what they went out to do is they wanted to see how do these methods handle incorrect data. Okay, how would potassium argon handle very recent samples? If our layers are billions and billions of years old, and they got carbon-related stuff, would they find carbon-14 in there? Okay, that's what they were thinking of. Okay,
Right.
And they weren't. Okay, you're gonna say something?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, that's a great approach, because if you're finding carbon-14 and things are millions of years old, it's gonna have a problem with your whole model.
Yeah. Okay. Again, the whole idea was, does the actual evidence fit the story they're giving?
Right.
Okay. And find out, like, are there weaknesses in the system? Okay. And so the RATE team was one of the ones that did this. Okay. Now, it's almost impossible to talk about radiometric dating methods without talking about the Mount St. Helens challenge with Steve Austin. Okay. So this is probably the most famous single case of radiometric dating methods. It's very controversial, and on both sides. So, but you pretty much can't talk about these methods without bringing this up. So Steve Austin in 1996 gathered samples from fresh lava that came from Mount St. Helens that had formed in 1986. Okay, just a few years after the main eruption. Okay. He sent it to a lab to be dated using the potassium argon method, which at that time was a very popular method. It may not be right now, but at that time it was one of the big ones.
What? Why is it not as popular now?
You're going to find out here soon. Again, without getting into details, but this test was a big reason. This case was a big reason why it's not so popular now. So. Steve Austin, he told the lab that it was dactite, which is a type of rock, and he said that they should expect low argon measurements. Okay, so that they should not expect a lot of argon, a lot of their the daughter isotopes in the sample. So in other words, it should be a relatively young sample. Okay, but he did not tell the lab where it came from. Any idea why that might be? Why he would not tell the lab that the rocks that this was from Mount St. Helens?
Oh, yeah, because I think a lot of the problem comes into how they kind of adjust the dates when they're assuming something's already an age already, right?
That's a big part of it, yeah. So if they knew it was from Mount St. Helens, they would know that any lava is only a few decades old at the most. And of course, the lab results would say results with that because they already had the answer. But the actual results range from 340,000 years to 2.8 million years on rocks that were only 10 years old.
Yeah, here's a good comment we got from a viewer here. Put it up here. Skew the results. Great point. Revolution against evolution. Mr. Doug Sharp and Rich. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Okay, now here's the issue that I have with some of the creation organizations. They tend to stop with this. Okay, they tend to stop at this point. They say like, okay, this proves that the methods are unreliable, but they tend to stop there. So let's dig a little deeper. Okay, what do the objections say? So the standard objection to this test case is, well, the methods are not meant to be used for anything under 1 million years old. Okay, and that's just one of the general limits to potassium argon. And what they failed to realize that's actually the point. Dr. Austin knew that these methods weren't supposed to be used for such young samples. Okay, and this never seems to enter their minds, is that he was intentionally trying to see what these methods would do for such a case. Now, if this was a robust system, they would have produced an age of 0, not well into the usability range of the system. Okay, does that make sense? So you have Ian Druby uses this image in his Creation Evolution Rant 100. You have a glass of water, and you have a glass that's half full, and you have another glass that has just like a couple drops in it. and the equipment that's really expensive measures things that's only a few drops, but gives a reading of glass half full. Does that make sense?
No, that's crazy.
Okay, an image I use is a truck weigh scale. Okay, we have a lot of semi trucks that come here through El Paso, and they have to be able to measure, they have to go through like weigh scales and that kind of stuff. So weigh scales that are meant to handle weights of 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 pounds, and you put a feather on the weigh scale and it measures 600 pounds, then you know something's wrong. Okay, that's what's happening here.
Yeah, but then when you have today is people say, don't question it, you're anti-science.
Yeah. Okay.
Here we got a good comment here.
Hold that comment right now because that's coming up.
Oh, you see it? Okay, good.
Yeah, I see it. Hold that comment because that's coming up.
Very good. All
Okay.
right, cool.
So today there are many labs that refuse to take samples less than 1 million years old for dating, and I'm like, wait a second, how do you know? How do you know that one? So again, the labs, and again, this is part of the fallout of this case study.
Yeah, Douglas said the same thing.
Yeah, and what that means is that again, the labs are adhering to the story; they're not following the evidence. Okay, if the sample was less than 1 million years old and the methods were robust, it would give an accurate answer. Okay, so other objections. Well, all that proved where those particular lava chunks were recycled and didn't actually form the lava. They're actually much older anyway, and that's the comment that Doug Sharp just mentioned in the YouTube chat.
Explain that some more. How does that even?
Okay, so here's the claim, and this claim comes from I'm sure you can see it here. The Grand Canyon Monument to an Ancient Earth. It's by
Oh, hey, hold it up some more. I'll highlight you.
Okay, I'm not sure if I can see it. I'm not sure if you can see it from here, but yeah. And of course, my camera is going to make it backwards. Yeah. This is not a friendly book. Okay, I'm just going to tell you right up. This is not a friendly. These 11 PhDs really do not. They really do not understand the flood geology at all. They really don't. Okay, and so what's happening here? This is a little technical, but it's not a big deal. But what they're going to say is the rocks in the lava from whoever knows past didn't actually completely melt, and when the lava from Mount St. Helens bubbled up, these rocks were from previously formed lava rocks. And so they're actually not technically they're not technically 10 years old is what the argument is.
Okay, so what are they basing that off of though? Are they just assuming that to fit the story, or is there anything they're pointing to actually?
That's a very good question. So we really I will admit that's a plausible scenario, but how do they know that's what happened here? Okay. Has that happened in actual lava where they found rocks that were not that are still hard in the actual lava? Yes, they found that. But is that what happened here? And if it happened here, Dr. Ashton was fortunate enough to just by chance select a few rocks that would not have completely melted in the lava prior. So I'm like, that's storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And again, and these are 11 PhDs using this as the argument. There's more. Dr. Eisen lied about where he got it from. It was a dishonest test. Well, if we're measuring isotopes, if we're just measuring isotopes and their ratios, that really wouldn't matter because a robust system would catch it. Okay. Now, the only way that Dr. Eisen lying in any point of this would make a difference is that the rocks actually weren't from that Mount St. Helens lava. Okay, that's the only way that Dr. Rosen lying would actually lying about what he came up with would make a difference. And there's an easy way to test it. Run the same experiment.
Right. That's how you do science. So.
Yeah, that's how you do science. That's called peer review. You verify the results. Another excuse I've heard is the lab didn't know what to do with it. Again, if all you're doing is measuring isotopes, this would not matter. If there's no argon, if there's no potassium, or vice versa, whatever, it's just going to count the ratios and figure out the dates in relationship if it was a robust system. Okay. There was another case when you may have seen this on YouTube, but Bob Benyard, who runs a radio show in Denver, he contacted Jack Horner when Mary Schweitzer found the soft tissue in the T-Rex fossil, and they wanted to find out if they could carbon date it, because, well, you got soft tissues, carbon dating won't last that long, so hey, let's see if there's anything there. And Jack Horner actually said that it's not a scientific test to find out if there's carbon-14 in the dinosaur bones. He actually literally said it's not a scientific test because it has to have carbon in it. And I'm like, a robust system would know whether there's carbon or not.
Yeah, and why not just test it then? It's like, what are you afraid of?
Yeah, so, I know. Yeah. Okay. And then also from the Grand Canyon book that I just mentioned, one of their other reasons is Dr. Austin should have known that in such fresh lava that there is going to be excess argon, thus it will naturally give off false results. Well, they actually didn't know that 20 years ago, or at least the Secretary either didn't know it or they wouldn't admit it. And that's actually part of the key. That's a very key part of the method itself.
Is there extra lava? Like, that's confusing.
Okay, no. Okay, so what they're saying is that in fresh lava, according to the potassium argon method, there should not be any argon gas in there because it will escape.
Okay.
Okay, that's a critical part of the method. And so fresh lava means that all you have there in potassium argon is just the potassium. Okay, so that's how the clock is set, quote unquote. So what these 11 PhD geologists have done is that they not only did not refute Dr. Austin, they actually refuted the entire method. Okay, they shot themselves in the foot when you actually pay attention to what they're doing. Yeah, I got another guy that says Jack Horner was afraid to get a truthful result. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty common.
Right.
Yeah, so now, in all of these arguments and reasoning, from the PhDs to the layman, what's not being said? Going to test the lava themselves to showcase how the methods are supposed to work in public. Why hasn't anyone tried to replicate the results and prove Dr. Austin was actually wrong?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Okay. The Ewan-Carrot lava flows. Okay, so the Ewan-Carrot lava flows of the Grand Canyon have posed a major problem for the deep time geologists as well, even though they probably won't admit it. They found Indian artifacts in these lava flows that range from 0.1 million years to 2,600 million years, and artifacts that are within 800 years ago.
Okay, now I know my friend Nate Loper. He's been watching some. We've had him on the show, and he lives around the Grand Canyon, gives tours. And now, isn't that an issue for the whole timeline itself? Indian artifacts, but then they're dating them that old. Like, I don't. That doesn't seem to match up.
Yeah. There's all kinds of problems with that. And then, and what's also really interesting is that this particular lava flow is older than lavas that are buried deeper. So, in this slide, okay, so there's the Gardenias basalt, which is pre-Cambrian, and they have this range of dating methods. So, potassium argon says from 791 to 853. Potassium argon isochron gives 715. Rubidium strontium isochron gives 10,070. And this is all below the start of life. Okay, so this is all in the near 1 billion year range. Okay, or not quite 1 billion years. Okay, and so this is from my griddle. This is the PowerPoint that you had shared with me, just to give me some extra images.
Yeah.
And so So he points out that there's a he singles out this one range for a reason, because the basalt from the Ewing-Carrot Plateau has these other ranges, and if you compare them, the only one that actually compares that's actually younger is the KAR model ages. Those are the only ones that are actually younger than the Precambrian. Okay, and then so he singles out the rubidium-strontium age, but if you look at the rubidium-strontium model for both sides and the Ka, you'll see the same thing. And so, in numerous cases, we have younger rock being dated older than, or being dated younger than older rock.
Wait, can you state that again? Because I think that's a really big point.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see if I can do a laser pointer here. Okay, so the rubidium strontium age, okay, for the rock that's way down here, okay, is stated to be 1,070 million years old. Okay, 1.07 billion. Okay. The lava that's way on top of it, after going through millions and millions of years of depositations of rocks, dates lava that's 1,340 million years, or 1.3 billion years. So they have lava that's older than, or older lava on younger rocks, and so it just it doesn't make sense. Yeah, I know, and this is normal. These are just specific examples that we're pointing out.
Right, pound your fist and call it science. Don't question it.
Exactly.
Here's I don't know if you saw that quote. I'll throw it on the screen here. Right here.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Let's see.
One of the comments by Revolution Against Evolution.
On Sunset Crater?
Yeah, he says Sunset Crater lava was dated in the millions of years, yet the eruption occurred in the memory of the Hopi Indians.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm watching the YouTube live, so that is got about a 20-second, about a 15-second delay. So yeah, but yeah, I've seen that. It's like, yeah. So I mean, there's all kinds of examples of this. Okay, so we're going to take a very brief look at how carbon-14 is produced, because that's the next part. I got several points to make on this. So cosmic rays and radiation will come through the atmosphere and collide with nitrogen in the atmosphere. And what that does, that performs carbon-14. The exact method of the decay points is irrelevant for how that happens is irrelevant for what we're talking about. And then the carbon-14 combines to form with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, which the plants take in, the cows eat, we breathe in and out, etc. Okay, so again, we're not going to get into the technical sides of all this, but how it's formed is the important part, is related to one of the issues I'm going to be talking about. So, with the Ray Project, John Baumgartner, he examined carbon-14, and this was probably the most easily accessible part of the radiometric of the Ray Project. And so you can find some of this stuff in the book, Thousands, Not Billions. I'm not sure it should be showing. And so this is pretty much done in layman's level. There are other books on the Ray Project as well with what they did. And but Thousands, Not Billions is more to the layman level. And okay, so but his study was on carbon-14. So carbon-14 has got an extremely short half-life in relation to this deep time Earth stuff. And within 50 to 70,000 years, all measurable carbon-14 would be gone. And some creationists have even said that if the entire planet was complete carbon-14, then in 1 million years, the entire planet would be gone. Okay, and so what Baumgartner did, he examined coal and diamond samples, among other things, from rock layers that were supposedly in the millions to billions of year range. and every one of them came back well above what's called the contamination level. Okay, that theoretically should be well documented, and I didn't fix that typo, but well documented and calibrated for, or should we say, should be.
Right.
Okay, and so his study is what made creationists realize, like, wait a second, carbon-14 is actually our friend. Now, I wouldn't use it for dating methods for much, and there's reasons for that, but what it shows is that a great level of inconsistency in the other dating methods. Okay, and so with that, we creationists started figuring out to start carbon dating dino bones. Okay, so a continuation after the formal rate study, Brian Thomas of ICR began to test various dinosaur bones for carbon-14. And he's tested 16 bones from all over the world as of 2015. And from all over the world, all different depths that they could be found. Okay, so he wanted to get as much scattered information as he could. And all of them came back within a 15 to 50,000 year range with no correlation to depth or location. Interesting, the same ranges of the coal and the diamonds.
Wow.
Okay, and numerous other studies have shown the same results. So there's only really one explanation for all this. They were all buried at the same time. And any idea of what kind of mechanism could do that?
It had to be something global and catastrophic. Just throwing out a guess.
And watery, like Noah's flood.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the only explanation for how to get these wide ranges of locations and depths getting the same results, getting the same amounts of carbon-14. Okay, now here's a little fun fact, and this is why I showed the graphic of how carbon-14 is formed. So way back in 1975, a guy named A.E. Wilder Smith, wrote this book, The Natural Sciences Know Nothing of Evolution. Okay, unfortunately, this one is out of print, out of formal print, I think.
Oh, let me highlight you here.
Okay. Okay, I'll keep that up. And The Natural Sciences Know Nothing of Evolution. The book is still available, but it's to find on Amazon, but it's hard to find because I think it's out of print, which is a big bummer. Yeah. Okay. Guys, so here's one of the comments that he made. Again, this is way back in 1975. This guy had 3 earned PhDs in chemistry. Okay, so this is not a layman. This is a scientist above scientists. He's had like 70 papers. I think he has like 70 books and countless papers. Okay, but he made this observation that the Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker as time has progressed, and we all know that, especially those who've been in creation debates.
Right. I think exponentially it's decreasing.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that the only comeback that the secularists have on that point is that the magnetic field does reverse. And I'm like, yes, it does reverse, but the last time, according to the secularists, was 780,000 years ago, which is kind of problematic for them.
Yeah.
Okay. But here's what he pointed out. So I'm going to go back to the slide here. Okay. So let me get my highlighter point. Okay. So the cosmic rays come in from the sun through the atmosphere and collides with carbon-14. So, a stronger magnetic field would result in less radiation coming through. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Absolutely. If less radiation is coming through, that's less radiation colliding with the nitrogen, producing carbon-14. Okay, so if there's less carbon-14 being formed, that's automatically going to make any old sample appear much older than it actually is.
Yeah, that's a huge point because the magnetic field would have been stronger before the global flood, right?
Actually, according to our models, especially the magnetic field went through several fluctuations right around the time of the flood.
Right.
Okay, but if there's anything that had carbon-14 prior to the flood, such as pottery or stuff, that would appear significantly older than it actually would have been. But even, right at the flood, I mean, anything within 1 to 2,000 years, the carbon-14 ranges start going out of whack after just 1 to 2,000 years, and this is a key reason why. And this is not part of the secular literature that I'm aware of. Because when I bring this up, they have no clue what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Okay. So so people try to carbon date like the pyramids and say like, well, they're older than the flood. I'm like, how do you know that?
Seems like the pyramids would have the entire Earth was destroyed that existed, so the pyramids would have been destroyed.
So the pyramids either survived the flood or they're post-flood. In either case, the dating method is unreliable at that point because they don't have the production of C14 rates in there as part of their calculations. Okay? And there's a whole technical side of that we just don't have time to get into.
For sure.
Okay, and then the knee-jerk reaction is contamination. So yeah, there is contamination, but it doesn't account for what we're finding. Okay, so like when you pick up a sample and you haul it to the lab, there is going to pick up some kind of carbon-14. Okay, no one's going to argue that, but shouldn't the labs know about this? Shouldn't they be able to measure and account for how much carbon-14 gets incorporated into a system? Okay, so someone wants to weigh themselves, and they got their own bathroom weigh scale. Does that the system for the weigh scale has to account for the weight of the scale itself? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the plate that you're standing on has its own weights, and so when you're reading your weights on the weigh scale, it takes out the weight of the scale itself. Okay, so have they done that with this? It's a very good question.
Yeah,
and it's never this has never been brought up when they talk about contamination, because it's only brought up when the dates don't agree with the story. It's never brought up otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's many more cases. Okay. There's a case where amber was misstated. So this is from Steve Schwartz. He's with Creation Moments, and every weekday they have a very short half-page blog on a creation topic. And so this is his one of his volumes called "Letting God Create Your Day." Okay, and one of the topics is how accurate is radiometric dating. And so I'm just going to read this again. It's only like half a page here. So it says, evolutionists are good at giving the appearance they know what they are talking about when they say that such and such a fossil is 150 million years old or 320 million years old or whatever. Creationists have learned long ago that radiometric dating methods cannot be trusted based as their own faulty assumptions and incomplete information about samples. No, we are not being anti-science. Think about it. When different labs test the same fossil sample, why do the labs often come back with results that are millions of years apart? Okay, that's one of the things that we mentioned with the lava flows.
Yeah.
Okay, so he gives a story here. A friend wrote in and said, in 1973, I was stationed in Hawaii in Kaneohe Bay Marine Corps Air Station on Oahu. I found some amber-like stuff oozing from a palm tree. There were no insects in it, and it was of the consistency of chewed gum. I put a bit the size of a marble into a film canister. Many years later, I came upon that film canister and found the resin to be harder than wood. On a fling, a friend of ours took it to the university where he worked and had it tested. The report came back that it was spruce amber, not palm tree, spruce, and over 150,000 years old. I never did tell him the rest of the story.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so again, we're not talking about the exceptions here. This is the normal that we're seeing.
Wow.
Okay. There are reports of living snails being dated to be tens of thousands of years old. I've heard one of a woolly mammoth being where half the mammoth was dated 10,000 years older than the other half.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions. You know,
Yeah.
for almost all of my 20s, everybody said I looked 15. So you can make a lot of bad assumptions and date a person wrong.
Same boat. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Like I say, I don't have time to go into more details than this, but but like, this is just given a sampling of like, this is bad. This is not good science. Okay, so to kind of summarize here, and then we're going to go to a break. I've not read any papers nor been referenced to any by the ardent defenders of these methods that indicate that these methods ever went through any kind of rigorous testing to account for such unusual circumstances. And even today, the secular science won't even consider such tests. And then I mentioned the Bob Enyart calling Jack Horner on that one. Okay. and Horner's excuse was like, I realize you guys are a bunch of creationists. I can't let this become a circus. Well, I'm like, if he was a scientist who was concerned about science, not an agenda.
Yeah, then just do the test. What's the problem?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's like, do they want truth? Do they want to figure out what the science actually says, or are they adhering to an agenda?
Yep.
Now, the only exception that I found so far was a guy named Dalrymple, and in 1984, he dated a number of historical lava flows, and there were a few of them who came up with ages of 0. But no one's been able to replicate his results, or tried, as far as I know, other than creationists.
I haven't heard of this guy. That's really interesting.
Dalrymple he's an evolutionist.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's not friendly, but I do know a number of the YC orgs that talk about the dating of historical lava flows. They actually cite him for getting some of the results.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so that is my summary on the test case, and I believe you want to go to a little commercial break before I go into how these methods are actually defended.
All right, great. Well, this has been awesome, Charlie. And for those of you guys who are watching, please share and like and subscribe on Engage Truth YouTube channel, and also share from our Engage Apologetics Facebook page. And hopefully more people will catch the second part of this session here with Charlie Wolcott from Worldview Warriors. And man, this has been great. And I just want to also do a shout out to all of my ministry sponsors. I'm a full-time missionary doing Engage Apologetics here in El Paso. But as you see, we want to try to have a reach beyond just our city. And we also have our online ministry as well. And so thank you so much to all of our supporters and church sponsors. And what I'm going to show next on our break here, if you guys want to get some more coffee, I'm going to show one of our videos about our ministry and Worldview Warriors. And you may see another ministry in this break or the next one as well. So thanks for watching. Please share the stream and check out these ministry promos as well.
Have you ever bought a product that you thought was going to be the best product in existence? I know I've done that before. A couple years ago, I bought this fancy cream that I thought would really help me grow a full beard. Well, obviously, that didn't happen. Now, false ideas, they have consequences, right? False ideas are powerful and it lies to you about reality. Another example is 2,000 years ago, there was a man named Paul who at the time believed that Jesus was not God. He was not the Messiah who had risen from the dead. And that led him to persecute Christians. But then he encountered the truth and he realized he was believing a lie. And he encountered the truth that Jesus had and truly was risen from the dead. And then he devoted the rest of his life towards proclaiming that Jesus is the risen Savior. And so he daily reasoned with people, showing that Jesus fulfilled prophecies that were written hundreds of years before he was born as a man. And he reasoned with people, showing that there was eyewitness testimony, that people weren't just making up stuff. He reasoned, showing that Jesus, in his life, death, and resurrection, actually solved humanity's greatest need. See, Paul, when he would go into Athens, he was provoked by false ideas, not only for love for people, but a passion that they would know the truth and that the lies would not cripple them. See, I lead a citywide ministry called Engage Apologetics, and I, likewise, am provoked that others would know the truth, the total truth of Christianity. We have people in our city who have bought into lies that Jesus is not God. Different religious groups actually believe that, and they have a false view of Jesus. We have people that believe that their life is an accident over many years of an evolutionary process, and there are consequences for believing that, and that your life ultimately has no purpose. So we have great goals to train people and train believers to confidently engage with others on the truth through weekly training, online training, and evangelism teams. But we need your support to help us do that.
Hey everybody, Jason DeZurek, president of Worldview Warriors with you. You can find us at worldviewwarriors.org. That's worldviewwarriors.org. Caleb Harrelson, I want to thank you for allowing Charlie Wolcott to be with you today with Engage Apologetics, and hope things are going really well. And Charlie, have fun over there. By the way, friends, if you want to find out more, not just about Charlie Wolcott, but about Worldview Warriors, again, you can find us at worldviewwarriors.org. That's worldviewwarriors.org. Some of you might be wondering, what is Worldview Warriors? Well, we're a group of godly leaders passionate about teaching and worshiping the God of the Bible. And we engage students, parents, and grandparents with relevant biblical discussion and challenge them to bring the message of Jesus Christ to this generation right now. We again, equip students to impact this generation for Jesus Christ. And we do this in numerous ways. You'll see on the internet there, again, at worldviewwarriors.org, just some ways we do that. And I also do a radio show called Do Not Keep Silent. You can find more about that at donotkeepsilent.com. That's donotkeepsilent.com. And just so you know, some core values that we have: Jesus' life. The rest is details. We love him. And for this reason, we don't apologize for the gospel and challenge students and their parents to build their life on faith in Jesus Christ. We also challenge students to think critically and invite debate with their peers, emphasizing that they approach others in love so that they can impact this world. And just one thing that we believe, I'd like to share with you one thing we believe about the Bible, and that's this. We believe the Bible is the holy, inspired Word of God, and that it is inerrant in the original autographs. Again, find us online at worldviewwarriors.org. That's worldviewwarriors.org. Again, my name is Jason DeZurek, president of the ministry. Been doing this since 2007 full time. And the ministry, well, we've been around since 2006. Got a lot of stuff going on there. Again, find us online at worldviewwarriors.org. Caleb, thanks again for having us, and we'll see you all next time.
66 to 88% of young people are leaving the church never to return. And you will see a direct correlation with those who've remained in the faith and those who've left the church.
Creation or evolution, which do you believe?
I'd probably have to say evolution.
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 Is there any powerful argument that makes you think evolution is true that causes that confusion?
I think the studies that have been done on apes and monkeys are pretty compelling.
I think that the genetic sequence can change over time, over millions and billions of years.
Mostly fossil records and just databases of really just the fossil records.
In your church background, were you ever exposed to any scientific evidence for creation by your church leaders, pastors, anything like that?
Definitely not.
Nothing in particular, no.
No, I don't believe so. Do you still attend church today or not anymore?
Only for holidays.
We kind of stopped going together as a family, but...
You see, there's one worldview that every single person in this country has been exposed to. The idea that evolution is true and that the Bible's account of origins is nothing more than fairy stories. When we demonstrate to believers that the evidence strongly supports the historical account of the Bible, not only is their faith ignited, but they become excited about sharing the Bible's truth with family, friends, neighbors, and even co-workers.
Did your church leaders, student leaders, bring in any creation teaching that showed you there was scientific evidence to support the Bible's account of creation?
Yes. Yeah, we learned a lot about different creationist scientists and the proof of young Earth creationism.
What are you studying now?
Biology.
Biology, right. Steeped in evolution. So, but you're not convinced by the evolutionary arguments in your biology classes?
No.
Still attend church today?
Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah, every Sunday.
Would it be fair to say then that being able to discuss creation openly at church has helped strengthen you in that area, prepare you for what you've learned here at college about evolution?
Yes.
All right, well, we're back, guys. I hope you enjoyed your break and got some coffee. I'm so excited about this this afternoon conference here with Charlie Wolcott. He's doing an amazing job. And those who are watching the recording later, please share this with all your friends and family members, and maybe talk about this with them over coffee afterwards. I think there's a lot of good information, and that's why we have it recorded. You can just go back and take some more notes and look at the slides there as well. Let me bring Charlie back in here. Welcome back, Charlie. You have a good break?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, let's hit the ground running. We'll pull up the slides here again. And please, everybody, share this with others, as I think this is really important information that people need to know. And as you saw in that last video, this is one of the key reasons why we're losing our youth, is because the authority of God's word has been undermined. And so why do any of these details matter? It's to the ultimate end that God would be glorified in his word, and that we would see death did not happen before the fall. And these ideas, fine-sounding ideas, they need to be tested against good logic, good science, and ultimately against the standard of God's word. So let's take it away, Charlie.
Alrighty. So what I did in the last section was give you a number of concrete examples of the errors that are in the system. Okay, and again, these are not outliers. These are not single case exceptions. We are finding this more and more and more frequently. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take what the specific examples, and I'm going to zoom us out. Okay, we're going to look at the big picture here as to what's really happening. Okay, so a lot of this section, it comes from this book, The Mythology of Modern Dating Methods by John Woodmorap. This is I would not recommend it for readers that really don't have a deep interest in the science, because it is extremely technical. But what John Woodmorap does in The Mythology of Modern Dating Methods is he goes through the logical fallacies that are being used to showcase what's really happening. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at is how do the people who defend these methods and use these methods, how do they defend them against these very clear, concrete problems that are showing up? Okay, are they legitimate, and does the science really support it? Because again, a lot of this I'm pulling from John Woodmorap's book, The Mythology of Modern Dating Methods, and you're gonna and what he does is that he goes through a lot of the technical stuff, but then he gives us like the big picture, so that we can kind of see what's happening on the logical side of things and stuff. Okay, so let's see. There are three major fallacies that Woodmorap discusses, and according to one of the reviews, Jonathan Safardi, he says that these are excellent for a test for your baloney detector, as he calls it, and I would call it a baloney detector. I would call that too, because what you're going to see is a bunch of baloney in terms of what's actually happening with these methods. So the first method is the first fallacy is called credit dating methods and blame nature. And so he says, indeed, the fallacious reasoning used by apologists for isotopic dating, radiometric dating, same thing. It boils down to three central fallacies. Okay, the first one is credit dating methods for ostensible successes. So in other words, if the dating methods give you the results that you're looking for, awesome, the dating methods work. but blame nature when they fail. Okay, so the results don't give you what you want. Well, obviously something in nature went wrong. So he basically says, heads I win, tails you lose. And what does it? It exempts isotopic dating itself from rational criticism, i.e., the dating method is never wrong, only the initial conditions have not been met. And it protects it from falsification.
So
Could you, yeah, go ahead.
So you're...
Caleb, you still there?
Oh, sorry, I think I was muted wrong.
Okay.
I muted
All
the
right.
wrong person to avoid the echo. I was saying, so you're saying that presuppositions matter then, right? Hold on. Let me unmute you. There you are. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. This is definitely a presuppositional based fallacy, because how they know whether it succeeds or fails, it depends. It is based on their story. It's not based on what the science says. Okay. Now, looking back at the concrete examples, did we see this fallacy already in use?
Oh yeah, we saw this earlier a lot.
Yeah, just in the last section. Yeah. So specifically with the with Mount St. Helens lava flows, and then the contamination arguments. Okay, the reasons against it is we have all these data that give us the right data, therefore it succeeds, but it didn't work, therefore some contamination took place. Okay. Okay. Now, is this logical? Is this science? I don't think so.
Nope.
Okay. The second one, appeal to marginalization. Okay. So Winograp says the second fallacy is the appeal to marginalization fallacy, or ATM. Okay. It attempts to belittle the significance of contrary evidence by spinning it as rare and/or occurring only under limited geologic circumstances. Okay. A classic use of the ATM is the often repeated claim about a few malfunctioning watches. Okay. I believe it was, I think it was either Carl Sagan or Richard Dawkins who made that comment. But basically, it's like we have all these kinds of different watches that are telling time, and of course, a few of them aren't going to read it correctly. So because I have all these other watches that work just fine, we can dismiss those. Okay, that's what that argument is saying. Okay. However, what that does is all that's doing is just ignoring that these watches are wrong. And what we're seeing more and more is that it's not a few malfunctioning watches, it's the majority of the watches are malfunctioning. Okay, and then Winograp continues, a more subtle use of this fallacy is, however, it involves a reluctance or refusal to acknowledge the broad implications of a discrepancy. And we also have to remember, many of these scientists and laymen defending evolution in deep time, they all say all it takes is one piece of evidence and we'll change our minds. You heard Bill Nye say that in this debate with Ken Ham. Just one piece of evidence and I'll change my mind.
Oh, did he really? Well, I must have. I forgot about that part.
And I'm like, you were given lots of it.
Yeah. Well, I think again it shows that it is a lot about your starting point, your presupposition. If he's not changing his mind still.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So and again, so how do they get around the odd data? They marginalize it. They make it seem like it's minimal, but is it minimal? I beg to differ. Yeah, and Doug Priori says, I think give credits to consensus science. Oh yes.
Yeah, I watched this real odd documentary the other night when they were saying praise nature. It was like if all the men died out. It's kind of weird.
I heard about that one.
Yeah, and it makes me think about this credence to consensus science. We care about science. We care about science and truth so much. That's why you're reporting about these things, where they praise the ones in power of science or praise nature itself, and to try to explain away things as if nature is some being, but no, nature is created by God Himself. So.
Well, there's a comment here. Since we're bringing that up, I mean, I know it's a little rabbit trail here, but let me get the right page number. Do you know who Michael Crichton is?
Oh yeah, didn't he write Jurassic Park?
Yep, he wrote Jurassic Park. So in a lecture at Caltech back in 2003, again, this is from the Creation Moments book, Letting God Create Your Day. We actually looked at his lecture, and he said, and Michael Crichton said this: I regard consensus science as an extremely pernicious development that ought to be stopped cold in its tracks. Historically, the claim of consensus has been the first refuge of scoundrels. It is a way to avoid debate by claiming that the matter is already settled. Whenever you hear that the consensus of scientists agree on something or another, reach for your wallet because you're being had. Okay, and then he continues. Let's be clear. The work of science has nothing whatsoever to do with consensus. Consensus is the business of politics. Science, on the other hand, requires only one investigator who happens to be right, which means he or she has results that are verifiable by reference to the real world. In science, consensus is irrelevant. What is relevant is reproducible results. The greatest scientists in history are great precisely because they broke with the consensus. There is no such thing as consensus science. If it's consensus, it isn't science. If it's science, it isn't consensus, period.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
I think we need to include that quote in the show notes. And I think Michael Crichton's an evolutionist, though, isn't he?
Not creationist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it's still a truthful statement.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's been reported in Creation Moments. All you gotta do is go to the Creation Moments website, and then you can just ask for them for that one or Michael Crichton quote, and it'll show up.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. But okay. So the third fallacy is the appeal to technicalities fallacy. Okay? An unwelcome date is rejected, and its rejection is excused on some technicality, usually an after the fact one. We get this one often. Okay. For instance, one might learn that a given discrepancy was expected because the host rock showed traces of alteration. Okay, so a rock that was dated showed something they weren't expecting, and it gave results they weren't expecting. So therefore, we got to reject the results. But since almost all rocks show some alteration, according to a guy named Harlan in 1990. There will be almost no rocks left to date if the hidden premise behind this fallacy was taken to its logical conclusion. Okay, so in other words, if the alteration of a rock is the reason for the rejection of the dates, therefore they would have to reject nearly every rock because they show it. Okay, so furthermore, as we shall see, uniformitarians have no problem accepting results from slightly altered and often from more than slightly altered rock, so long as it agrees with their ideas. Thanks to their widespread use of the ATT fallacy, all isotopic dates are trial balloons to be accepted or rejected and rationalized at will. Okay, so to explain the trial balloon concept, a trial balloon is you basically fill your balloon with whatever you want to do, and you let it go. And if it pops, it's not good. If it does what it's supposed to do, it succeeds. Okay, that's basically what a trial balloon is. But because of this fallacy is so widespreadly used, Woodmarap is saying like every single dating result and test is one such trial balloon. Okay, so the only way they know if it works or not is if it agrees to the story. That's what Woodmarap is arguing here.
Yeah, and everyone's saying, well, you can't listen to creation scientists; they're biased. And I actually heard someone once say that to a student in a public school. They're like, don't even look at that stuff. They're so biased. And I'm like, everyone has a bias. It's just whether they're consistent within their logic and does it correspond to reality.
I know, yeah, and how are they not biased?
Yeah. Like I'm biasedly making a non-biased statement.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so
person. I'm going to try to minimize the echo for those listening. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So a question is that has to be addressed with all these fallacies. Were these methods ever rigorously tested prior to their public use? Okay. So Woodmarap says the myth, historically speaking, the overall validity of the isotopic dating methods had been very rigorously established prior to their recognition as such. Okay, that is what is widely claimed. So reality check. Whatever the degree of the critical experimentation that had in fact pre-existed their general use one could make a case that, in actuality, isotopic dating methods and their results had been accepted rather uncritically because the results seemed to fit with uniformitarian ideas about the great antiquity of the Earth. Okay, so what Wimmerap is saying is that they're saying that, that these methods had been rigorously established, and Wimmerap was saying is like, based on whatever experimentation had been done, the argument for the reverse could be made. And so, far from being rigorously tested, the unspoken attitude in uniformitarian geochronology seems and still seems to be as follows. Use whatever dating method you have that seems to substantiate the belief that rocks are millions to billions of years old. Until some better dating method comes along, then use that method.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have no other words.
Yeah. Okay. So how can we see this example? Let's see, it was 2 months ago now that you had Dr. Jackson on here. About 2 months ago, something like that. August. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think that. Yeah, he was on in July.
Yeah. July and August. Yeah. Okay. So you remember when Dr. Jackson went over the hominid evolution argument story, and he basically debunked everything.
Oh yeah, I did great.
Okay. That is a perfect example of this issue being brought up, because the fossils that are being used to prove human evolution, they come and go, and they weren't rigorously checked prior to their public announcements. And when they were publicly checked and they rejected it, they just kind of dismissed it and moved on to the next one.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
It's the same. The same is happening with the dating methods. Okay, it's the same thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and I think I should say, for those who read articles and you see your update on some other new find that supposedly is like millions and millions of years old, and the people writing those articles, they don't understand all the methods behind it. They're just trying to report something that they think is a big find, but there's a lot of other details behind whatever was actually found, and a lot of other assumptions, as you've been laying out for us.
Yeah, and I mean, Charles Jackson, he does a number of short videos on ports of origins, and he reads through a lot of science news articles. But in 2019, it seemed every other article was this makes us rethink evolution, and this makes us rethink our history, and I mean, it's like every other article was about that.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing with the Big Bang. They have a new. That's the one I get more than anything, is we've figured out the model now. I'm like, well, you figured it out again. You didn't know it to begin with. It's I call it like a duct tape model. You just try to keep fixing it over and over.
Yeah, and that's really what it is. Like, it's duct tape stuff. Yeah, they're just holding it together. And I question the use of duct tape, because it's like not even Band-Aids. This is worthy to call it. Yeah. All right. So yeah. So what we're saying is, like, these things were not rigorously tested, and so their idea is that you and so what he suggests is that, okay, with all these problems, okay, again, with the human evolution fossils, okay, we see all the time that, we realized that we were wrong about this. Okay, classic example, Piltdown Man, okay, or one of the obvious known frauds, but those were taught for 40 years as absolute fact until the scientists figured it out that it was just a pig's tooth or something like that. So here's what Wimmerap says. Since all these serious problems had been discovered after the dating methods in question had enjoyed widespread use, it can hardly be claimed that they had been rigorously checked before this widespread use.
Right.
Okay, is that making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It was taught like these Piltdown Mound, Nebraska Mound, the ones that were clearly frauds. They were obviously they were taught as fact for decades, and then we do what I keep hearing from the skeptics every time I bring that up. It wasn't you, a creationist, who figured it out. It was us scientists. Okay, so when confronted with this evidence, apologists for isotopic dating changed their tune. Having been exposed in their earlier made blustery claims about the wonderful reliability of isotopic dating, they now give us a song and dance about the fact how they were the ones who discovered the flaws in those dating methods. Okay, so and he goes on to give a hyperbolic example. This is like an arsonist who sets a building on fire, calls the fire department to report the fire he sets, and then has the audacity to proclaim himself a hero for having reported the fire.
Oh my goodness, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. So I got more to this as well. Okay. So let's just say for argument's sake that Engage Apologetics really takes off. Okay. And it just explodes, and you have enough money for your ministry that you can hire a media guy who can create all your videos, put together, write articles about what you're doing, do all that kind of stuff. Okay, hypothetically.
Yeah, that would be great, man.
Yeah, it would be
listening.
great.
They put the Lord puts that on your heart. Let's do it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Okay, but again, I'm using this as an analogy for what we're seeing in the public here. Sure. Okay, so just recently, I think it was in May, I found an article where the article said that we found fresh DNA in 75 million-year-old dinosaur bones. Okay, this is a secular article. So I shared the media report, and the evolutionists were very quick saying they got that wrong. Okay, like did you read the science article? It's not talking about fresh DNA. You creationists, you always get it wrong. And I'm like, this is your media. Okay, yeah. So you get this media guy for your ministry, and they repeatedly, they vaguely get what you're saying correct, and they kind of they give like very questionable headlines that don't match what you're actually saying. The articles are only get half the truth. What would you do to that media guy?
Well, we would have to sit down and have some coffee and a long talk.
Probably, and then probably followed with "You're fired." Now, okay, so let's say that the media is what's getting this wrong, and they're the ones that are using this hyperbolic example of the arsonist doing the fire. They're the ones setting the fire, okay, because they are reporting what the scientists did not actually report. Okay. Yeah. When have the scientists gone to correct their own media, on the evolutionist side?
I don't see that very much. Not that it doesn't happen, but
yeah. I mean, it may happen, but it really doesn't happen because I've asked people that support this stuff, like, so if the media is getting the actual papers wrong and you're getting mad at me for reporting what the media says, why aren't you getting mad at the media for getting it wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, and some realize that what I'm talking about, and they actually did that. I'm still waiting for results.
Yeah, well, then there's the groupthink issue of they're like, oh, the peer review. Like, well, there are some creation scientists who have written in secular and creation journals and so forth, but they're looking for some certain standard that fits the consensus science, as Douglas mentioned, and so it's kind of this endless cycle. Things aren't really being checked.
Yeah, exactly, and things are not being checked at all. Mm-hmm. And so, so if the scientists aren't correcting the media, the textbooks, the museum's displays, the media reports, if they're not corrected, then there's only two possible scenarios for that. One is their ignorance about it, okay, and so they're ignorant about what their own media is saying about their own papers, or they're complicit in the spreading of it.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So, and so when they realize, oh, we got a major problem, we got to pull this out. What they do is that they just quietly pull it out. All they're doing in the fire example, all they're doing is ceasing feeding the fire. They're not putting it out. They're not seeking to undo the damage that was done.
You think that'd be the honest thing to do?
One would think. If you get it wrong, you go public. We got it wrong. Let's fix this.
Yeah.
But they don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. But, it bothers me if I speak on the point. So.
Yeah.
I mean, and as believers, we should be leading and modeling that. Like, hey, I was inaccurate here, and in that example.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. But this is and unfortunately, some do not take correction. But the issue I have is that I have a hard time finding people who can correct me.
Yeah, well, we can't.
And I'm not trying to say that to be arrogant. I'm really not trying to be arrogant on that one. But it's like you're trying to correct me with evolution, and that's not true. So let's
right. Yeah, I gotcha.
Let's do something better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, storytelling. Okay, we've already mentioned this briefly, but this quote comes from Rethinking Radiometric Dating Methods. Hold up a little higher so you can see the whole title. Okay, this one also it gets very technical, and so I'm not so like it goes into the math of each of the individual methods, and so I'm not gonna bog us down with this. It says, finally, measured isochron ages of amphibolite rock from Southeast India gave an age of 481 million years using the rubidium-strontium method, but an age of 824 million years using the Sumerian neodymium method, which is another one. Researchers tried to explain away the obvious disagreement by claiming the older rock, which was at the time, the older age was at the time at which the rocks underwent metamorphism, while the younger age results from a later heating of the rocks. So how do they know this time sequence? Can they time travel? They are using unknowns to explain unknowns. This is blind faith wrapped up in philosophical premise, not science. That's the same thing as with the Mount St. Helens excuse of, those rocks actually didn't completely melt, therefore they're actually much older than 10 years. It's the exact same thing. Again, PhDs are doing this.
Yeah. Well, it's a great thing about your presentation is I think people just need to see the logical consistency within it. And, what is truth? That which corresponds to reality. It's not contradictory. A is not non-A. And a lot of people like to dismiss people, their ideas, if they don't have a PhD. I'm like, well, but are their ideas logically consistent and correspond to reality? If so, then you should listen to that because PhDs can make logical errors. But at the same time, we shouldn't dismiss their evidence out of hand. Like, let's deal with the arguments, not ad hominems, which ad hominem, attacking the man, is primarily what we see in this whole debate, really.
Yeah. All right. So another one, censorship. Okay, that's another tactic they use. They just silence us. So in 2012, a group of scientists did a separate dinosaur carbon-14 study other than the ones that ICR did. Okay. And their ranges went from 22 to 39,000 years. And they presented their material to the Western Pacific Geophysics Conference, again, in 2012. So after their presentation, they received a letter saying that their findings were obviously wrong because of contamination and that the bones could not be younger because they are dinosaur bones. They have to be in the dinosaur ages. Therefore, their entire presentation, their credentials, everything was pulled from the conference as though they never presented or were at the conference.
Wow. That's ridiculous.
Okay? Yeah, that is ridiculous. Yeah, and this is how the consensus is formed. Okay, or they can change the data entirely. Skull 1470, along with Stone Age tools, was discussed in great detail in Bones of Contention. It was in the first edition. This is a newer edition, so unfortunately, this one doesn't have it. Doesn't have this particular case. I don't think it does. But the KBS Tufts, where it was originally found, it was originally radiometric dated to be about 212 to 230 million years old prior to the human skull being found. And then suddenly it was redated to 2.61 million years. Okay, again, before the skull was found, or around the time the skull was found, and then when they realized that the skull was too human-like, they changed it to 1.7 million years. So they literally are changing. So one of the ways the dates agree is because they are made to. They literally change the dates.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier, I was watching Dr. Andrew Snelling's teaching on radiometric dating, his really good series on this, and he said dates are calibrated. They're calibrated against something else. And of course, he's saying they should be calibrated against the biblical historical timeline, and factoring in things like the flood as well.
Yeah. So you can follow this in greater detail on Ian Juby's Complete Creation, 2nd edition, episode 21 on YouTube.
Yes, good stuff.
Yeah, where he basically reads through the published literature on the skull and the dating results just in sequence, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, his YouTube channel is Wazaloo.
Yeah, Wazaloo, and I have that in my resources. But This quote is of interest. This is from "Should Creationists Embrace Evolution" by Norman Nevin, and what it does, it addresses the main evolutionary story and compares it to Christianity on a theological and a scientific angles. But he has this quote in their conclusion that's very interesting. So Thomas Kuhn, who's the historian, the science historian who wrote The Structures of Scientific Revolutions back in 1970, he argued that scientists work with a set of ideas to inform and develop their research until they reach a point where it is impossible to continue with that hypothesis. Until this position of impossibility arises, evidence challenging the prevailing hypotheses can be ignored, silenced, or indeed modified. Okay, so this is a secular guy noting this back in 1970, that the normal practice is that if data does not agree with the story, it's changed, deleted, modified, anything but following the data.
Yeah, I like what another apologist said. It's not science, quote unquote, that says anything. It's scientists that say something.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here, the evolutionists love to say that we just need to follow the evidence and that they follow the evidence, and we are seeing here they never follow the evidence.
Yeah, it's inconsistency for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to move faster here because we're already closing on 2 hours. What do the labs say? Okay. So when I was doing the bulk of my research several years ago, I reached out to several of the radiocarbon dating labs that seem to still have up-to-date contacts because I didn't know how to look for that stuff at the time. I approached them as a teacher because I was teaching physics at the time as a substitute to get extra information that I wasn't even finding online or through other stuff. That specifically had to do with how the labs directly operated. And I'm hoping to start teaching AP Physics 2, which covers radiometric dating, in a few years. One lab replied, and this is my questions and their answers. So my first question was, I understand that erroneous results or outliers from the usual data will come up in any experiment. Okay, that's no big deal. So how many times on average do you test a sample until you are satisfied with the results so that outliers can be adequately accounted for or dismissed? Okay, so in other words, how many times do you run your samples through your system? Okay, I know with Lucy, that skeleton was dated 23 times. And I read one paper where another sample was dated 78 times. So I'm like, okay, so, okay, and then their answer. Read about radiocarbon intercomparisons where multiple labs date the same standards to create consensus states. There's that word consensus again. Articles about intercomparisons are presented in the journal Radiocarbon. Individual radiocarbon samples are usually dated individually. Occasionally multiple specimens or multiple dates on a single specimen are obtained. Did they answer the question?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they really did.
I asked a very simple question about their particular procedures. How many times do you usually date a sample?
I'm like thinking, you had one job.
Exactly. You had one job. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Contamination in samples, such as C14 leaking in and out of a sample, is a legitimate concern. How do you determine if contamination has occurred? Their answer. You'd have to narrow the field of contamination, as the answer is dependent upon on the type of contamination you wish to detect or verify. Again, the Journal of Radiocarbon has published many articles on this topic, and the topic is covered in several places on radiocarbon dating, second edition, a textbook. Did they answer the question?
Well, they kind of danced around it a little. But...
Yeah, they danced. Yeah, their answer was go read a textbook. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, I'm didn't really answer the question. Third question. In my research, it is widely accepted that the decay rates are constant. I would like to be able to verify this claim should a student ask about it, because I'm thinking that a student may be as knowledgeable as I am about these methods, they'll ask such a question.
Yeah.
Would you know what tests have been done to see if their rates alter, such as temperature, pressure, electromagnetic pulses, or earthquakes? We know solar flares have a small effect.
Sure.
And so that got me thinking about electromagnetic pulses, such as lightning strikes or earthquakes. And so the answer, see discussions in the book I mentioned. They have a good discussion of the decay process, including the statistical probabilities. Again, did they answer the question?
No. Have you read that book, though, just out of curiosity?
I haven't. No, I haven't. The book is a textbook.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But again, I'm asking like, the book was like $100. At that time, I was broke.
Yeah, I understand that.
I was a substitute with student loans. I was broke. I couldn't afford it.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll have to get it at some point here soon, but I'm not sure it's going to do what I want to do though. But anyway.
Yeah, maybe a future video.
Yeah, I know.
Claims in there.
Yeah. And then just for clarification, so when using the AMS to get your ratio count of parent-daughter isotopes, are you able to pass a ground-up piece of sample, such as bone or pottery, through the device a second time, or do you need another piece for what's tested? And this one they actually did answer. They can only date each sample one time, and then you have to get like another little piece of it in order to get additional dates. And I had a reason for asking that question, and I'm going to explain that here shortly.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so again, I'm trying to race through this so we can actually end at a reasonable time. I've had PhDs tell me that they readily use multiple independent methods to validate the dating methods. So they say, well, one's geological, one's physical, one's chemical, one's biological. So they use ice cores, they use plate tectonic drifts, they use dendrochronology. They use all these kinds of things to validate these radiometric dating. But actually, that's not really what makes it independent. They can't have any relationship to each other. So, but often what we see is not independence, but interdependence. Okay, and so what I mean by that is that all these methods depend upon the other being true just to know if they work. None of them are actually validated by anything concrete. So, how do they know radiometric dating works? Well, we can use plate tectonics, because plate tectonics move at such and such rates, and they get the same time frame that we expect from radiocarbon dating. Well, how do you know plate tectonics works? How do you know ice core dating actually is doing that? I've got friends who have pictures of their roof with a single snowstorm depicting 5 or 6 different layers in a single snowstorm. Kind of hard had to have annual layers in one night. Yeah. So what it ends up being is that the entire system is one big circular reasoning argument, because they don't trace it back to anything that's concrete, and when they do, whenever they do, it's always in error.
Yeah.
Okay. Conspiracy theories. So if isotopic datings were false, some sort of massive conspiracy would have to be in existence to suppress this fact. Okay, and here's what Wimrap argues: a conspiracy is not needed for the simple reason that peer pressure within geology are sufficient to dissuade and suppress any potential dissent. Peer pressure does not leave the childhood playground. Particular isotopic dates and interpretations of them come and go, but the central belief in the overall validity and in the validity of the multi-billion year age of the Earth is never open to serious reexamination. Any and all discrepant data is simply explained away as part of the very geologic methodology of interpreting isotopic results. Okay? Those are all those fallacies that we've been talking about. And so Wimrap continues, actually often takes a backseat to consensus mentality among uniformitarian geochronologists. This makes it all the more unnecessary for conspiracy to exist in order to discourage the appearance of divergent thinking. You don't need a group of guys manipulating puppet strings to make sure that no one looks at bad data. They're just trained to ignore it and dismiss it or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Now there is a conspirator in all this, and his name is Satan, but that gets into the spiritual side of things. Okay. So the peer review process. So let's look into this. Let's examine and demonstrate how this peer pressure and not some sort of nefarious conspiracy serves to repress alternative viewpoints within each respective areas of studies. Okay. So a guy named Saul in 1986 said, the hardcore belief in plate tectonics is protected from direct assault by auxiliary hypotheses that are still being generated. Okay. So plate tectonics back in 1986, no one could challenge it, and any challenges were basically protected via these side stories and other ideas that basically prevented it from even being examined.
Now, how is that different from catastrophic plate tectonics?
I'm not sure I can answer that one right now, other than it's not catastrophic.
Okay. Just to differentiate between that is helpful to me.
Okay. Yeah. This guy's not talking about Baumgartner's catastrophic plate tectonic model. Okay. This is just general plate tectonics, plate drift, and from the secular models.
And I think that's a lot slower than the flood catastrophic plate tectonics.
And then Hamilton in 1998 says, then as now, peer review can represent the tyranny of the majority. I have run the peer review gauntlet perhaps 100 times. My papers described and interpreting geology in more or less conventional terms have progressed smoothly, whereas publications of my manuscripts challenging accepted concepts have often been impeded and occasionally blocked. So again, this isn't just some creationist saying that we can't get in. These are the secularists saying, if we challenge the convention, we can't get in. Okay, and then we'll wrap up this section here. If they're wrong, how would they know? And so Wimrap says, it all boils down to this. If dating methods are in fact invalid, how would the uniformitarian even know it? There are now so many forms of special pleading and rationalizations, and these are so thoroughly woven into the very thought processes routinely used in isotopic dating that it is doubtful if the invalidity of radiometric dating could even be conceived by uniformitarians. Okay, and I've seen this in my discussions on Facebook and stuff. Like, they can't even comprehend the idea that the Earth not being billions of years old as an option. They can't comprehend it.
Yeah.
Okay. This fact should remind the reader of George Orwell's 1984, wherein the enslaved populations could not even conceive of such things as freedom and democracy because such notions were not even part of the current vocabulary. Okay. So things like global flood are automatically written as anathema to any person in these fields unless they were already rooted in the Word of God. Okay, and so Wimrap says it is precisely the newspeak and doublethink in isotopic dating, along with earlier discussed peer review within establishment science, which makes unnecessary the existence of a conspiracy in order to effectively suppress any potential doubts about the validity of isotopic dating. Okay, there's no intentional deception or amongst the head guys to all the mainstream scientists. It's this newspeak. It's this when we did our previous talk on brainwashing, it's brainwashing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You guys go check that out. Several episodes back.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 4 o'clock. You want to take our break?
Right. Yep. So
okay.
We're going to go to our final commercial break, and we just want to thank you guys for watching. And I think we probably have about 20-30 minutes left on this break. And so it's just been a great afternoon on this conference. A lot of information, but again, it's recorded, so you can go back, look over the slides. And again, I just want to thank all of my ministry sponsors and also Worldview Warriors just for their shout out earlier. And I know they have a conference going on today as well, and a great ministry. Hope you'll check out their website. Next up, I'm going to highlight Canyon Ministries. I've had Nate Loper on the show before, and I hope to have him again. And just a great scholar. I know he's working on his PhD, and great ministry. He works with many other people to give tours in Grand Canyon and show how really the Grand Canyon confirms Scripture itself. So I hope you guys will join us back after this short commercial break, and hopefully get some coffee as well.
I'm John Elbert, the director of Canyon Ministries. Excited to tell you about the things that we do here in Grand Canyon. One of the things we offer is whitewater rafting trips through Grand Canyon. It's an adventure of a lifetime. We offer 4-day rafting trips, 7-day rafting trips, and 9-day rafting trips, all motorized rafting trips where we get to experience Grand Canyon from the very depths down on the river. It's fantastic. But we also have opportunities for you up at the rim, for those that maybe just aren't into the whole rafting thing or have that time to be able to do that. And so we have 3 different rim tours that we offer every single day of the week except for Sundays, year-round. We have a morning tour and a sunset tour, which are both 4 hours long inside the park. And then we have what we call our full-day tour, which is 8 hours inside the park. Whether you're at the rim or down at the river, what we're going to do is help you to see that you can absolutely trust God's word right from the very beginning. We want to affirm or confirm your faith in God and then equip you to be able to share that with others using the majesty and power of His creation found in and around Grand Canyon. You can find us at canyonministries.org. You'll also find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. You'll find us on TripAdvisor. We want you to come down here to Grand Canyon, up to the rim of Grand Canyon, experience this incredible place with us, and then share it with the rest of the world.
Helium gas is renowned for its ability to diffuse through materials quickly. Why is it then that we find an abundance of helium in certain rock crystals, that it has not managed to escape from them? This has significant implications for the dating of rocks using radioactive decay. That's because helium is formed when some radioisotopes decay, and therefore lots of helium suggests lots of decay has occurred. Moreover, if lots of decay has occurred, it also suggests that the rock is very old. However, nuclear physicist Dr. Russell Humphreys realized that lots of helium trapped in the rock crystals that had not had time to diffuse out means that the rocks were actually young. Dr. Humphreys concluded that nuclear decay rates must have been dramatically faster in the recent past, and that is why rocks that are actually only thousands of years old are commonly wrongly dated using radioisotope decay as millions or billions of years old.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
What is the actual genetic difference between humans and chimpanzees? This is a question that comes up over and over again in this creation-evolution debate. And if it is true we're 98 to 99% genetically identical to the closest evolutionary relatives, evolutionists say, it feels like they're just kissing cousins. Well, let's dig down into what the scientific data actually say. If you look at the 2005 chimpanzee genome paper in Nature, you look at subsequent papers, the bonobo paper, the gorilla paper, the orangutan paper, all of them give basically a consistent answer. That most of our DNA can be aligned to chimpanzee and vice versa, and in that region that does align, it's about 1 to 2% different in terms of single letter differences. But if you say, wait a minute, are there sections of human DNA that fail to align to chimpanzee? Are there sections of chimpanzee that fail to align to human? The answer is yes, and it's far more DNA than is that 1 or 2% different. So if you incorporate all of these numbers together, the stuff that aligns and is almost identical, the stuff that can't be aligned at all, you get a number about 85%. What's even more important is what that percentage translates to in terms of absolute differences. So an 85% identity, 15% difference in terms of raw DNA letters represents 300 to 400 million single DNA letter differences. That's a massive number.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Those of you who just jumped onto the stream or watching the recording, I want to thank you guys for watching today our afternoon conference on radiometric dating with Charlie Wolcott. And we're going to wrap up this last section here, and I hope you guys will like and subscribe, comment on our YouTube or Facebook page as well. Please share it so others can engage with the truth on and subscribe to the Engage Truth YouTube channel. So we're going to bring Charlie back on, and let's wrap this section up here. All right.
For the past couple of hours, what have been the overall what ICR with the Ray Project has done? What has Woodmarap realized in his studies? And what I'm going to introduce you here is very briefly what my own studies have done. My own studies are rather technical because they're very mathematically driven. However, I want to just give you an introduction to what I'm aiming at with it. Okay, my studies are not complete by any means. There's a lot of stuff I just haven't had the time to really kind of get everything in, but I want to give you a snapshot of what that's where I'm coming from and what I'm looking at. Okay, so again, what the YC orgs have done in investigating these methods is incredible. Okay, one of the Ray team's results was one of their conclusions was like there's evidence that the decay rates have accelerated during the initial creation and during the flood. Okay, and one of the things that the secularists continued to miss is that they said further research is needed to explore this option. Okay, all they said is that an accelerated decay is an option. Okay, it is possibly what happened. John Woodmore suggests that the apparent concordance of dates and their consistent results could actually be a result of mere chance. Okay, but of course, to prove that, it would take a skilled statistician to do that, and that also would need more research. But he also brings up a lot of documentation of the susceptibility of these isotopes involved to leaching in aqueous solutions, and there's a flood that could provide that. And so there's a lot of problems, and I think both angles have part of the picture. And I'm going to add another one here. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick look at the exponential decay equation itself. Okay, and the research done by these creation groups, they emphasized on the assumption that the measurements being done are accurate. And this was even that comment was even made by Jake Ebert when ICR came here to El Paso 2 years ago. He said that the measurement of the decay rates were pretty accurate. And in my research, I'm like, I'm not so sure about that. Okay, and again, the creation organizations that I've talked with about what I've been doing is something that they've not heard of before. They've not thought about it. Okay, so this really is unique. Okay, and so I've been working on mathematical analysis of these methods for the last 7 years, and I just haven't had the time to really focus on it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on one aspect of what I've been looking at, and then I'll mention some of the other things I've been looking at as well. Okay, questions so far, Caleb?
Nope, you're doing good.
All right, probably make sure that you're still here with technology. All right, so what I'm going to look at measure the half-life. Okay, so as I began doing my research and started sharing what I was coming up with, some of my friends on my Facebook groups asked this key question, and it's like, how is the half-life measured? Okay, when I was at the Cadre with the Creation Truth Foundation, I asked that question, and they're like, we actually don't know. Okay, it's a question I don't think anyone's been asking. Is like, how do they actually measure the half-life? And the answer is far more complicated than many people realize. And again, it is not. I want to make this emphasis: it is not directly measured. Okay, we do not actually directly measure the decay process happening. Okay, now the idea of the half-life is that you take the number of decays that take place from a sample where you know the size of it. You do your mathematical dimensional analysis, including counting the number of atoms in the sample, and then extrapolate it until you get your half-life. Okay. Okay, that's the core idea. However, again, no one has directly measured it, and so how is it measured? Okay, there are two machines that do it. One is called the Geiger counter. The other one is called liquid scintillation, and I'm going to address the Geiger counter. Okay, probably because I've done a little more research on it, but also for time's sake. So this is a picture of a Geiger counter. It was the primary tool used for most radiometric dating detections. It was basically perfected by Willard Libby, who got his Nobel Prize for coming up with the carbon dating method. Okay, I've got one of these in my classroom, not this particular model, but I do have one in my classroom. I've not had a chance to use it yet, but if I can get my school to let me teach AP Physics 2 in a couple of years, I actually hope to be able to use it because I got some experiments I want to try.
Yeah, show this video to the principal.
I'm not sure that will go well. Yeah, so what happens with the Geiger counter? Very simply, your sample that's decaying is put into a gaseous tube, and then the decay particles will ionize the gas. Okay, again, I'm not going to go into the chemistry of this. And then the ends of the tubes are highly charged with a high voltage, and then so the free electron and the ion will immediately be drawn to the charges, and that'll produce a discharge, and that discharge is what counts as a decay, quote unquote. So it's indirect. It's it does what they want it to do, but I'm not buying it. Okay, the voltage range has to be strictly monitored. Okay, because it really only works within a certain voltage range if too little or too late, or not too late or too high, or if too little or too high, or the count rates become unstable. Okay, there's a typo in there. This also indicates And so they have to control the setting for how they measure the half-life. And what that indicates to me is that any claim about the decay rates being constant are unintentionally, artificially so. Okay, so we really don't have enough data about what's actually happening in the Earth with our current technology to know if these decay rates really are constant, or if other factors can alternate. That the skeptics will say, like, the only way you can change the decay rate is to change the weak nuclear force. And I'm like, there's more factors that go into play than that. And most of them don't even know what I'm talking about when they mention it. They kind of like go, okay, because very few people. I mean, I had a PhD who adamantly defends these methods, and I asked about how it was done, and he immediately Googled the same things that I'd already Googled years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm like, really? I can tell you're Googling. Okay. Now, this process could be carried out in a physics or chemistry lab. Okay, so I found it in a manual, and so I'm just kind of showcase what the manual says. Okay, so they observe that there are decay processes for 3 sessions of 10 1-minute observation periods. Okay, so that's a total observation time of 30 minutes, but in each 10-minute session, they change out their samples. So we're really looking at 10 minutes per sample, but for argument's sake, I'll give them the full 30. Okay, and this is critical. Now, the manual also says that there's a fudge factor they have to include because the Geiger counter can only count for what comes in its direction and its detection field. And so the manual cites a 20% efficiency, which means 80% of the decays are unaccounted for. So that caught my attention. Okay, and then if you follow the link that I provided there, that'll take you to the manual I'm talking about. Now, there's some questions I have with that. So in admitted lab, the Geiger counter can only count the radiations that pass through the detection field, and radiation we would know goes in all directions, and this does not include radiations from within the sample that get absorbed by other atoms that never actually make it out of the physical sample. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, and it doesn't include the radiations that actually get all the way through the gas chamber. It doesn't actually reach the gases. Okay. And it doesn't consider the 20% efficiency of the device itself. Okay, so a more expensive device could improve the efficiency. However, this fact of the efficiency was taken not from the instruction manual of the device, but a scientific peer-reviewed paper. So that means you really can't expect much improvement. Okay, and the paper is included in the lab manual.
Oh well.
Okay, and so. And then the lab results with all this showcase they got very close to the proclaimed half-life readings. So I'm like, okay, so you're able to reproduce controlled environments, not taking into consider what's really happening in the real world. And so now this could be accurate. Just where I'm at in my research at this point, I have no reason to believe it. Okay, so again, I'm not saying that these measurements are wrong. I'm saying they're not convincing to me.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that?
Yeah.
There seems some question mark on some.
Yeah, there's question marks. Okay, so if 30 minutes is what they're observing, how much of the half-life are they actually observing? If it was U-238, they're only measuring 0.0000000000127% of that half-life. That was 12 zeros.
That's pretty good. I would have got lost after
12 decimal points of a percent of the half-life is being observed if they're doing the 30 minutes. Any statistician will tell you that's not a good enough sample space to make your claims. Okay, potassium argon, 4.3 times 10 to the negative 12th of a percent. Rubidium strontium, 1.12 times 10 to the negative 13th of a percent of the half-life. Carbon 14, almost 10 to the negative 6% of the half-life. Now, that just doesn't make sense. Okay, I'm a math guy. I'm like, that's not a big enough data set. Now, okay, let's be fair here. Let's play devil's advocate for a second. The main research would have actually studied individual samples for longer, but I kind of doubt much longer because they would change out their samples per observation period. Okay, so they're not observing the same rock as it decays over time. They're observing multiple rocks as they're decaying. This doesn't show consistency, or this doesn't demonstrate or account for consistency.
Yeah, I don't understand why they don't do the same one longer.
Yeah. Now, I mean, again, it would have been longer than 30 minutes, but I don't see how it would be more than a few hours for one specific sample, running their devices for longer than a few hours. Okay, that part doesn't make sense to me. So any mathematician who realizes that this is the amount of observation that they're doing is going to say, like, that's not sufficient sample space. Okay, that's not enough data.
Yeah.
So again, is that sufficient? So we're talking about because so the claim for their half-life, it demands perfect constant decay rates, and because we're measuring so short of a time, if they're off even just by a little, that has drastic effects on what their range is because their data sample is so small. Mm-hmm. So any kind of error factors will really mess things up. Okay, and that's part of the study I need to do is what happens if you introduce a 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, 10% error factor.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're graphing data, if all your data points are too close to each other, you actually don't even know what kind of graph it is because you can't best fit it. There's not enough. You don't have enough data points spread out enough to see what kind of curve it produces. So you actually can't determine if this half-life is exponential or linear without just doing some kind of intentional mathematical manipulation.
So for those who aren't as mathematically inclined, I know what you mean.
Yeah, okay.
But, just if you could just briefly explain exponential decrease and linear decrease. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so in an exponential decrease, I had a slide way back at the beginning about how carbon-14 decays exponentially. Okay, and so after half the time, after half of it is decayed after a certain time period, and then another half, and then another half decays. Okay, does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so it produces a kind of a sloping curve that flattens out. Okay, let me let's see if I can get in front of my camera well enough to kind of show the sloping curve.
Gotcha.
A linear curve is simply a straight line. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's
good. A good visual of this is your bathtub. You fill your bathtub, take a bath, you pull the plug, and it drains out at a linear rate. Okay, and it's the same rate the whole time it drains. Okay. I don't think there's enough data at this point to suggest that we can make the distinction because we're not making enough observations. Okay. Again, I could be wrong about this. Okay. My research is not complete. This is just where I'm at right now. But I'm not seeing enough for them to be able to justify their claims that are so rock solid that I can't question it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a proposal. Okay, this would get me to change my mind about this. Okay, we could measure the physical decay of a sample. Okay, after a given time period. So Vernon Cups of ICR says we could measure a single carbon-14 atom out of 10 to the 15th with our AMS counters. Okay, so I'm like, all right, we can measure really small amounts. So here's what we can do. So we use the carbon-14. I did the math that we should be able to see carbon-14 decay by 1 millionth, or that is like 1% of 1% of 1% within 3 days.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, that's if the half-life is 5,721 years. So what we could do is we could measure out an amount of carbon-14 that we have, put that sample in a chamber with no nitrogen. Okay, and the reason why is because nitrogen is the daughter isotope, and we actually cannot distinguish nitrogen as a daughter isotope and natural nitrogen. So we make sure the chamber has no nitrogen. And then after 3 days, we see how much carbon is left, how much physical carbon is left, and how much nitrogen is produced. Okay. Simple experiment. Okay. Now, if we can't measure those exact figures, then well, just take the idea, stretch the time a little more. Okay. Now, a standard sample could be, say, 5 grams. Okay, I've just made up a number. If that's the case, we should see a loss of 5 micrograms of carbon-14 within 3 days. Now, again, we could stretch the figures there to make it a little more reasonable for our measurements. But this is a very doable experiment. And as of today, I don't know of any such experiment being done. Yeah. This is the only way we can validate these half-life measurements. Yeah, this is the only way. This is the only way we can do it.
Yeah, I'd say we should get this done. Hopefully, there's some scientists watching this, man. I don't know what needs to happen, but let's. I
know. Yeah. So I don't know how to set it up. I don't have the money for that. I got more money as a teacher than a substitute, but I don't have that kind of money.
Yeah. I would love to see this experiment.
Yeah, but this is an experiment that would silence any questions about the decay rates. And Doug Priority says, like, this is a worthwhile experiment. I agree, Doug. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is how you do a robust testing of your ideologies, of your ideas. You test everything. Okay. Real quickly, 2 other angles that I've been looking at are the ranges of the methods demonstrably based on our ability to measure the amounts of isotopes. Okay. This is what I started with in my research and my calculations, and I ran into blocks because I noticed that the limits of the ranges were based on age of the Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is what caused me to have to stop on that. I'm like, wait a second, I can't. This doesn't work. Okay, but it does show that those methods their ranges are not based on math or science. They're based on stories. And then, but carbon-14 has some other issues too that so this is my idea. I can't quite say this is accurate or not right now with carbon-14 in particular. But my idea was if you can carbon date something as old as, say, 70,000 years, you should be able to measure something as recently as 2 days ago by simply reversing the ratio of carbon-14 that would be present at those ages. Okay, that's my thinking. Okay, now does this actually work for the carbon-14 method? I'm not sure yet. I haven't done enough research to be able to do that particular analysis yet. Okay, but again, carbon-14 is a little more complicated than that. So again, more research, more calculations are needed. Okay, but that's one of the things I'm looking at, and so far I've not found anything that indicates that these ranges have anything to do with our ability to measure isotopes scientifically. Mm-hmm. It's all based on the story.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect I want to look at, I can't do it because I don't have enough data to work with, but I want to analyze the error ranges. Okay, and these are the plus value ranges given for each age that they report. Now, I'm not quite sure if these plus minus values are the plus minus of the ranges of the dates that they got, or if it's the error factor. Okay, but what I want to study is the error factors. Okay, are they consistently determined? Are error factors in these results determined by a consistent set of factors, or are the factors too widely unknown to give anything reliable? Okay, so that's another mathematical angle that I'm looking at. Yep. But I need a lot of data points to be able to kind of analyze that, and I just don't know how to find that at this point.
Yeah, maybe someone watching can reach out and point you in the right direction.
Okay, so we're going to quickly wrap up because we've been going for 2.5 hours, and I wanted to be done by then. So, okay, so what can we say about all this? Okay, I really want to hit the highlights. Okay, and I'm trying to keep this as low at a layman level as I can. I have tried to avoid getting into the technicality side because I want laymen to be able to understand this. Those who are not scientifically inclined to understand what's happening here. But what we've seen here is that repeatedly that these methods proclaim glory of the scientific community. That gets scientifically proven and time again. They're not even defended scientifically. Okay? They're defended religiously, be constantly kept above scrutiny, which is hardly scientific thinking. There's an article I found just a couple months ago that said that the idea of falsifiability should be removed from the scientific jargon.
Wait, why?
And I'm like, what?
Wait,
Yeah, because and they were specifically talking about evolution, climate change, and these politicized deep time mythology stuff. It's like those are above consensus. Therefore, we should not even be thinking about falsifying them. I'm like, who does this guy think he is?
Yeah, that is defending it religiously.
And
if you're finding carbon-14 in dinosaur bones, soft tissue.
Yeah.
But yet you're gonna still hold to them being millions of years old. It's not about science. It's about philosophy.
Yeah, that's right. That's an ideology. That's not science.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw this posted in a atheist troll den, and they were praising the idea, and I'm like, oh well. Okay, so I get asked this all the time. So since I reject these dating methods, well, how would you date something? How would you determine the age of something? So John Montgomery, who was quoted in Josh McDowell, The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. This is his second edition, not his most recent third edition.
Said that the new evidence.
Yeah, the new whatever. I don't know what that label is, but yeah. So this was back in '99. Okay, so American Institute of the Holy Land Studies researcher Thomas Drobena, he cautioned where archaeology and the Bible seems to be in tension, the issue is almost always dating, the most shaky area in current archaeology, and the one at which scientific a priori and circular reasoning often replace solid empirical analysis.
Oh yeah.
That's archaeology. And we've seen here throughout this presentation, it's everywhere. It's in every science field.
You watch all the Patterns of Evidence movie. That's one of the big points.
Oh, and yeah. I was going to mention that up. Yeah, in Patterns of Evidence, especially on Exodus, on the Exodus one, the primary reason for the skeptics for saying that this wasn't evidence was the dating.
Yep.
That was their reason. Okay. And people say and people who argue about us about age of the earth and stuff like, are you arguing just about our dating methods? I'm like, that's the central battlefield.
Yeah, the assumptions there.
So I'm going to do a quick thing on historical science, and then we're going to we'll close up. Okay, so Ken Ham and others in the YC orgs, they make a really big point of distinguishing between observational science, which makes our technology, and historical science, which is the study of our past. Okay, and the secularists hate this distinction because they think they're synonymous.
Yep.
But few realize there actually are different processes, and even their own textbooks say it. And those that watched the Dismantled documentary, which I saw that you did a little preview for.
Sure.
That's one of the things they opened up with. They actually quoted a secular textbook, one of the most popular versions, saying about what historical science is. So it's not just us saying that.
Yeah.
So I love what YC does in making this distinction, but I don't like how they address it. Okay, this is me personally. I think their distinction is incomplete. Okay, so what Ham did in his debate with Bill Nye, he denied Bill Nye's use of historical science as just being historical science, but he really didn't point out that his own side was doing the same thing. Okay, now he was correct in his conclusion, but he didn't go deep enough to explain why what he does is the correct way to do it and why the secularist is wrong. Okay, and so so I mean, I love what Ken Ham is doing. I love what the Christian org. I mean, I think even ICR makes the mistake here. They don't go far enough to make the distinction of how this works.
No, unpack that more. What's the distinction you think that should be made?
That's what this slide's about.
All right, great.
Okay, so observational science, sciences, they operate on the three major steps of observation, testing, repetition. It can only be done in the present with current people. Okay. Historical science takes the principles that observational science has made and then applies them to past events which are not observable, testable, or repeatable. It's a different process. Now, here's where they miss the point. They do it indirectly, but they don't make it explicit. To do historical science correctly, you need three things. You need to know the starting point. You need to know how things began. You need to have a historical record of the event. And then you need to know the ending point. And of course, all of us have the ending point. That's what we're studying right now.
So ending point is today.
Yeah, ending point would be today.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you can discern the third of these three if you have the other two, if you have two of them. But it really only works well if you have all three. The best secularists who have ever done this are the Mythbusters. Okay, because the Mythbusters, They knew what the starting point is of their myths. They had the historical record, which was the myth, and they knew what the results would be. Okay, so all forensic sciences that works, when it works, it utilizes all three of these. There's a thing called eyewitness testimony. Okay, you watch all the crime shows. What's the first thing they go after? Eyewitnesses. Okay, because that tells them how to look for the science and what kind of science to look for. Now, could the eyewitness testimony be wrong? Of course. Could the science be wrong? Yes. And forensics often gets it wrong when they don't have all the pieces together. Okay, so that's one thing that I think they get at YC Orgs. They don't go deep enough to explain why it works for us but not for them, because we have the historical record. It's called the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, crime shows love to put sciences as a teller of all things. Yet, even in these shows, it's amazing how easily they jump to conclusions, only for a missing piece of evidence to show that they were wrong. Okay. So even with their own stuff, it doesn't work as well as they say. Now, historical science can never demonstrate anything to be true. It can't do it. It can only demonstrate the possibility of it being true. You have to have that historical document, and only the evidentiary method can provide this. So science can show that George Washington could have crossed the Delaware River in 1777 across chunks of ice. Okay, but it's the historical document that makes the claim and validates the claim.
Yeah.
You have to have the historical document, okay, or a historical record or oral tradition, something that tells this is what happened. Okay, so now to the question: how would I date something? I wouldn't date something with a method that depends upon too many assumptions that cannot be demonstrated to be true. So in other words, I wouldn't use any of their methods. I would date something with a historical record. Novel idea, huh? Okay. Yeah. Now, if I don't have a historical record, well, of a particular event or object, well, I could look for something that I'll look for something that I could match with historical records. Okay, that's how a lot of archaeology works.
Right.
And archaeology works a lot faster when they realize that the Bible had it right all along.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the problems is
that
they're assuming the Bible's wrong historically, so
and therefore everything else is wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we as Christians, we have the most reliable and trustworthy historical document ever written, and it's the Bible. Every piece of true science in any field, when fully investigated, okay, I'm going to make that point again. When fully investigated, it will always show the Bible was right all along.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, I'm going to bring this back to why we started. Why is this important? So the entire purpose of deep time geology, formulated and made popular by Charles Lyell, and all the methods which have come surrounding it, had one goal, and that was to remove Genesis from history.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the whole point of deep time, is to remove Genesis from history. So when you remove Genesis from history, it becomes just an origins myth.
Yep.
Okay. It's not the actual history of origins. Go ahead.
Oh, like they say it's just a polemic, or it doesn't really matter. But then you have 2 Peter quoting that the flood was to cover the entire earth, and comparing that to the return of Jesus.
And it's not even written as a polemic.
Yeah.
Okay. Or a mythology, or as a analogy, or an allegory. Take your pick. Every one of their literary genres, I always ask them, like, do you even know how to use that literary device? And they don't. Yeah. Okay. So when you lose Genesis as the history, you lose you also lost the role and purpose of the Creator, who is the standard of morality, and then the biggie, the sovereign justice of God upon every individual, as first revealed through Noah's flood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is the start of the Romans 1 spiral into depravity. Okay, you want me to read that real quick?
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay, yeah. So I'm actually in the process of my Worldview Warrior blogs. I'm actually in the process of doing a 3-post series on Romans 1 here. But it says, for the wrath of God is revealed, that's Romans 1 starting in verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image like a corruptible man, birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. Okay? The rejection of God in creation is the start of this process. Okay? Therefore, God, verse 24, therefore God gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their heart to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Sounds like evolution in a nutshell right there, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. You know what hit me recently is it was clearly known from the beginning. We didn't need these special Gnostic devices to understand Scripture. It was pretty evident.
Painfully obvious. Okay, so for this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise, also men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error, which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, but not only do the same, but approve of those who practice them. This is what this origins debate is all about. Okay, it's not just about do you believe the Bible? It is about life itself, effectively. Okay, this is a gospel issue. This is not a secondary issue. This is not a tertiary issue. This is a primary issue. This is about the gospel itself. Okay, and the reason why so many people defend these methods with religious fervency is because it lets them, in their minds, escape from the wrath of God.
Yeah. I mean, you have the foundation laid out in Genesis.
Yeah. And those who claim to be Christians and still defend these methods, trying to incorporate them two together, I don't have nice things to say about it, but I won't call it a compromise. What I'm going to call it is that they're taking the pagan models of deep time here and decorating it cosmetically in Christianese. If you strip away all the scripture from their models, they don't change at all. We look at all the old Earth models. But, all right. So here are some of the resources that I've been sharing throughout. Okay. Each of these books I have I showcased throughout the talk. The internet links are in the presentation. I also threw in Evolution's Achilles heel, which is a good summary of a lot of these issues. So Thousands Not Billions, Mythology of Modern Dating Methods, Rethinking Radiometric Dating Methods, Natural Sciences Know Nothing of Evolution, Evolution's Achilles heel, Ian Juby's Wazulu channel, The Cost by Russ Miller, Should Christians Embrace Evolution, and there's plenty more. Okay, these are just some of the ones that I've been doing. I've been looking at. And finally, here's my contact information. My name is Charlie Wolcott. I am a writer, blogger, and speaker for the Worldview Warrior Ministry. You can email me at charlie@worldviewwarriors.org, or you can get a hold of me on my Facebook through my author, my J. Wolcott author page on Facebook. You can follow me on my personal page, but I don't friend people readily unless I know you or have seen you in action to where I trust you.
Right.
But anyway, that is what I've got for today. I know this was a lot of information. I strongly recommend you go back through and re-listen to everything, and look at those tactics, and you'll see them everywhere.
Yeah.
And I want to conclude is like, the Bible is the Word of God. It is trustworthy. It is always right. Anything that man does that dares to question it is going to be folly.
Mhm.
and it's not worth trusting them. They do not know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, amen. Well, this has been awesome, Charlie. I want to just thank you again for your time and your research. I know it's a lot of research, and you're a full-time physics teacher, so I'm sure you got a lot on your plate. And I want to encourage our viewers and listeners, stick with us. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but we have coming up soon, we're going to talk about Charlie's recent book, 10 Reasons to Believe the Bible. We'll get more into why Scripture is our ultimate authority. Hey, we can match it up. There we go.
Yeah, we have that scheduled for Veterans Day, November 11th.
Okay, and it'll be on
we don't have a time
Saturday.
yet. We didn't determine a time yet, but
yeah,
that was the day we agreed to.
Right, we'll have that down in the schedule soon. And so this has just been an excellent series or afternoon conference. This is not like my normal episodes, which will be a lot shorter than this, but we call this an afternoon conference for a reason. And it's been a joy to showcase Worldview Warriors, Canyon Ministries. You saw some videos from Creation Ministry International, some great work in the Dismantled movie, and of course, we're trying to stay as full-time missionaries. We're engaging with the cults. We're engaging with the creation issue and core apologetics, which on the foundation of Scripture. So those are our big three focus areas with our blogs, podcasts, and our classes that we've been doing. And we have, if you're wanting to join online or in person, we do have our defending get to going through space this Monday night and looking at the distant starlight issue. So hope you guys will subscribe to our Engage Truth YouTube channel and check it, or you can share it on Facebook off of Engage Apologetics, and that really helps with the algorithm. More people to see it, just a like or a comment and thumbs up or whatever, and more people can engage with the truth. And I know there's people who can't get over past the idea of why we make it such a huge issue. As we said, it's foundational to the gospel, attacks the character of God. Jesus said, in the beginning, God created the male and female, not after millions of years. And so we don't want to say Jesus is a liar. He's a perfect substitute for our sin. In the past, I did accept a different viewpoint. And I have since changed my mind that Scripture consistently teaches this, and the science confirms that. And I was a believer then, but I think there was an inconsistency there. And so we're not going to say all of a sudden that you're a false brother, but we want you to be consistent and stand on God's word and consistently, and the foundation for the gospel is laid out in Genesis. So thanks again, Charlie. I appreciate your time today. So we're going to end our broadcast, and please share it with as many people as possible so more people can engage with the truth.